a HI or Israelite question Q&A today. Uh, Prayerfully, the barking will go away in a little bit, and prayerfully, everybody's doing well. Thank you for being on with us. Appreciate, love you. Thank you for everybody who was part of Thursday Rising Prayer. Thank you for everybody who came over from Tuesday evening. As a reminder, we will not have any regional meetings this week for the rest of the week because we did everything on Tuesday. So no regional meeting tonight, no regional meeting tomorrow. But prayerfully, we will be able to speak with and talk to and see everybody this weekend. Back to our normally scheduled programming, if you will. And we should have an FOT Feast of Tabernacles meeting on Saturday, so we should be back on track with that. Amen. All right, so thank you, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. We'll get ready to do our Bible pledge. Sorry for all the extra noise. There's a bunch of dogs around each other this rising. It is what it is. As long as you guys can hear me, I'm sorry for you having to deal with extra noise, but prayerfully you can hear me all right wherever you might be. Trying to get this started. Let's go ahead and get the podcast going. Okay, so we're gonna do our H/I Q&A session. So once again, this is not an official Q&A session. So I may or may not. Well, we'll get to that in a second. Let's go ahead and get started. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of mine heart to be acceptable in Yahweh's sight. He is our strength and our redeemer, and it is in his name, which is his authority, that we pray, praise, proclaim, project, and protect today's message. Aman. Servants of Christ. Shalom. Hello, everybody. I am Pastor Kofi, Pastor Servant of Christ, where we are always changing lives one mind at a time by being a voice of the voiceless and speaking the unspoken. Alrighty, praise God. So, for today, we give our honor and praise once again to the Most High. We give our praise and honor to Him for my wife, the Honorable Amma. We thank everybody for being on, ministerial staff, moderators, secretary, staff, Lottie Dye, everybody, community. If you're first time listener, one time of many. If this is your last time listening, whatever the case, if you agree, disagree, we appreciate, love you, and appreciate your presence on here on this rising. Alrighty. So we're thankful and grateful to have everybody on here one more again. And let's say hello to everyone real quick, and then we'll get ready to do our Bible pledge and jump right into this. How you doing? Into the deep, Beck, Minister Samela Ray, Sister Sabrea, Wavy Davies, Sister Nadine, Russell, Bruda, Mad Bear, Sister Mignon, Cole. Okay, thank you. The bark is not a problem. Thank you for that. How you doing? A little bit Tizzy, Raj, everybody come on in. If I miss your name, by the way, church, to my head, not to my heart. I think I saw thoughts with this SJ, Miss Q. Love yourself. Hey, Dr. T. Prayerfully, you guys are doing well over there. Michelle, Sister Shima, Happy, Sister Deborah. My wife is on. Once again, please check her out on TikTok, YouTube, her website, and Pinterest at Bloom and Flourish, not A-N-D, the letter N, Bloom and Flourish. She is a healer, herbalist, chemist, and biologist by degree. How you doing, Minister Tamara? Shalom, peace to everybody. Thank you for being on. We appreciate, love you. How you doing, Sister Monica? Praise you. Okay, I was hoping that you were going to be on early so we could make sure that we got to your question first, since we've been waiting on your question. So we praise Yahweh for everybody. Thank you guys for being on once again. And just know that you are thought of. We're praying for you all. If there are some persons that we have in Cali, not sure how far south, but I know there were some fires and stuff. So praying for you all if you're dealing with that, or if you have any family members that are dealing with that, we are lifting you up in prayer, and prayerfully all is well. And you'll be able to make it through with relative ease. How you doing? Double OG, triple OG, Brother Charles in the house. All right, so we'll get ready to do our Bible pledge, and we'll jump right in. Now, once again, recall, let's say our Bible pledge first. If you want to put your right hand in the air, or your device, or your Bible, and just repeat after me. This is my Bible. This is my sword. In this will I trust. For Yahshua is Lord. No sword of God shall ever be heard. For this is my Bible, and this is Yah's word. Hashem Yahweh, Aman, which is in Yahweh's name. Amen. Alrighty. So today is Q&A, but it's not an official Q&A. We won't have another official Q&A until next Thursday. However, I was led by Ravak Chakwotash to make sure that we had a special type of Q&A to where we will focus in on some of the things that Hebrew Israelites are speaking on and saying, as far as, and I'm going to say more HI today because I know I'm going to say it so many times so that somebody's going to try to say that I'm being reverse racist or something. So I will do my best to, well, we know who we're talking about. You know who you are. Amen. And we praise y'all for you. How you doing? Call me Jay. So just to let that be known, how you doing, Sister Renee? We shall be dealing with those things. But if you hear me say HI or if you say us, blah, blah, I'm talking about you. Okay. But unfortunately, on these platforms, persons try to make it to where when we talk about ourselves glowingly, it means that we hate everybody else. So unfortunately, you have to be careful, even though you shouldn't have to be careful. How you doing, Bold Classic? So today's going to be with that. I'm going to start with a couple things, and then of course feel free to put the stuff in the chat or however you like to ask whatever questions. How you doing, Joe King? So one of the things that so I think it was Sister Monica. I told her that if she gave me till Thursday, we'd answer the question. I do not have the whiteboard, so I dropped the ball on the whiteboard, right? But yes, pushing past ridiculousness, right? I don't have the whiteboard, but I will answer the question that you had on Sunday when you called in at the end. But so I will give some information. Now, the way that I thought I was going to answer this is not even the way Holy Ghost gave me anyways. How you doing, Dark Matter? However, it's going to be very relevant. And matter of fact, I think it'll be life-changing for anything that Yahweh gives us is life-changing. So the question that you had asked is, there's confusion or there's persons that argue over who is Gog and Magog, is Gomer Gog, where do these belief systems come from, etc. Right? Oh, thanks, babe. Well, if you do, I'll be honest, you don't necessarily have to, and I don't even know where I set it up because I don't even have the easel for out here. So I appreciate you for doing. I appreciate you for doing it, babe. Yeah, I'm not even sure if I'll be able to set it up. So thank you. Like even if I could, it would be very. Every time I touch it, it would probably fall somewhere. I don't know. Maybe I could figure something out, or maybe we could figure something out. But I do have some. I do have some information for you, nonetheless. Right. So when persons talk about Gog and Magog, there's two places. I mean, there's really a few. Matter of fact, Ezekiel 38 and 39 that we went over on Sunday. We went through really Ezekiel 34, 35, 36, 37, skipped 38, and then went to 39. But if you read Ezekiel chapters, the chapters in Ezekiel chapters 38 and 39, you would discover that they are actually really talking about Gog and Magog, right? So you'll actually see very quickly that that's a spot as well you can get into. So when we were talking about the things that Israel must become, dry bones, coming back. So remember Ezekiel 34, hey, we got to get back to culture. I'm sorry, Ezekiel 34, we got to get rid of these preachers who will not preach the word of Yah, right? That's what Yahweh says. He will get rid of them because they're eating the sheep and eating off of the sheep. They're not feeding them. Ezekiel 35, you've got to speak against the mountain of Esau from the mountain of where Israel is. Ezekiel 36, we must get back to our culture. Ezekiel 37, dry bones can live once you get back to your culture. Ezekiel 38 and Ezekiel 39, speaking on, hey, Gog and Magog is something serious, but Yahweh has already decided we shall be victorious. Amen. So that it goes hand in hand. So that's a place chapters 38 and 39 actually focuses as well. The two places that we'll focus on today, for time's sake, is Genesis chapter 10, or Barashat Yah, and Genesis chapter 10 and Chazan Kaf, or Revelation chapter 20. So we'll focus on Genesis chapter 10, Revelation chapter 20. Mathematically even helps, right? Genesis chapter 10, all right, Revelation chapter 20. And when you look at those places, that's where we see a lot of Gog and Magog, right? So to focus in on there, and then we'll start diving into some of the stuff that you guys sent, and then of course we'll open it up for anybody else in the comment section. And thank everybody for being on. How you doing, Bravo, and everybody who's on all the different platforms today. We appreciate, love you. So, if you go to really Genesis, and we go to Genesis chapter 10, that's where we start talking about the lineage of Japheth, Shem, and Ham, right? And so you'll discover very quickly. So if we go just right to verse 1, let's go to Genesis, chapter 10, verse 1. Now these are the generations of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Noah being the seminal head, right? Shem, Ham, and Japheth being the sons of Noah. And unto them were sons born after the flood, right? So after the flood, these are the sons that they had. Not all the children, just the names of the sons, right? There are places where you can find some of the wives' names in different places, especially in Apocrypha, right? But just for the sake of today, right, I'm going to focus on the sons, all right? Verse 2, the sons of Japheth, Gomer, and Magog, and Madai. So Japheth's sons are Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshech, and Tyrus, right? So Japheth has many sons. Now, with Japheth having many sons, we can, all right, we could talk about all of them, but the focus today is Gomer and Magog, or what eventually down the road becomes Gog and Magog. How you doing, Brother Jermaine? Right? So just to let it be known, we're only focusing on two. There are many different descendants of Japheth just in that, right? Just as far as we're talking about sons. Remember, it used to be that we would refer to the sons because they have the seed that comes out of them. So we look to them to where the family goes. That changed into the woman. When you have modern Israelites, it's just another thing I'm gonna plop in there. If you have modern Israelites, they will tell you that it's the woman, right? And by the way, the man and the woman become one, so you really can't separate one from the other. That's the correct way of looking at it. However, um, biblically, if you're looking at okay, who is what, they focus on the son because the son's supposed to be the one who protects the family and it's supposed to be the one who is a representation of the Most High, right? That being said, it has changed to where the woman is now where you get it from, and that's actually changed during the time of chattel slavery. That is not an Israelite or a HI way, our way of looking at things. That is a very modern Israel way of looking at things because of chattel slavery. Remember, they even enslaved you, right? How you doing, Sister Tiana? How you doing, Tamaya? So I just want to make that plain that there are persons that'll be like, well, what's up with this and blah, blah. There are places like, even for example, if you go to the book of Jasher, you'll find out the wife of Noah. You'll see her name, all that stuff, right? If you know the characters, you'll find out what it means. But a lot of persons don't focus on that. We don't get a holistic way. And even I don't know if this is true or not, but there is a possibility that when even this part of Genesis was being written, they just threw out the names of the women, especially when you got to the Greek versions. I'm not sure how authentic that is, but it kind of gives you the mindset of what we're dealing with concerning misogyny, right? But that is not our goal to continue with said misogyny, so I just want you guys to be aware of that. Alrighty, how you doing, Brother Dwayne? So we're going to focus on two sons. We're going to focus on Gomer and Magog. Matter of fact, the Bible focuses on the sons of Gomer, right? It tells you that those sons are Ashkenaz, Riphath, and Togarmah, right? It tells you that that's the name of those sons, right? So it makes it very clear that we need to know about these sons of Gomer here, right? Especially remember, because this is something that's for us. Why is it important that we catch that? This is for us. Remember, the Bible is law and case study, correct? How you doing, Sister Shima, if I didn't say so already? And how you doing, Sister Jonah? So the Bible is law and case study, correct? But it's not law and case study for everybody because everybody doesn't follow the law. The Bible is also about our history, or about our story. So we have to recognize and realize that if these names are written, if these brothers' names are written, if these family names are written, if these now, because remember, these places where they dwell, they will be named after the seminal head, after the father of the nation. So these are fathers of nations. These are not just random names. So we must recognize what's going on here. And these sons of Gomer are important, especially the first one, Ashkenaz. Amen. Okay. Right. First one, is Ashkenaz. Now, why is that important? We know that why that's important. Who is Ashkenaz or Ashkenazi? Who are those? How you doing, Sister Helen? Who are those people? We can make that real clear right off top. Who are those people? And I'm not here to bash anybody. Just making that clear, right? How you doing, Sister Sonia? Who are the Ashkenaz? How you doing, Yasper? Revelation 2:9, Revelation 3:9, right? They are the modern Israelites, right? They're zero, all ish. If you know, you know, right? If you support, you support. You got it, you got it. So the Ashkenaz is important to recognize that they come out of Japheth, which means that they are non-Shem. If they are non-Shem, that means they are non-Shemitic. If they are non-Shemitic, it means they are non-Semitic. Salah. So anybody who says that we are anti-Semitic because we deal with somebody who is non-Semitic is a liar. I'm gonna try to walk the walk as best I can. Moderators help me out, especially on TikTok. Y'all know somebody gonna come through, or TikTok gonna come through, whatever, right? But hear what I'm saying, right? If they come out of Jasher, and this is not me teaching this, by the way. If you go and sit in front of an Ashkenaz teacher, he will tell you, usually he will tell you that, yeah, we are of that branch. Now, what they'll tell you is we have adopted the ways. They'll try to make it work, right? And Sister Monica, like I said, I'm going to answer this in a different way than what I thought I was anyways, but I think this is just going to do nothing but bolster your position. You already know a lot of this, but this is basically just going to be extra stuff for you to be able to put in there, right? So when we even see some of these names that you'll see, even names like Tyrus and stuff like this, or Tubal, or even when you start talking about the sons, and you get even to like the sons of Javan, which are not the sons of Gomer, to be honest, or Gog, but at the same time, obviously, this is family, this is kin. So even when you get into stuff like Tarshish or Kittim or even Elisha, stuff like that, you'll notice that these are names that would not be considered to be Israel, but they will eventually live north of Israel. Matter of fact, if you go into your concordance, if you have a Strong's concordance, you'll discover that they'll start telling you that all of these persons are considered to be northern people. Northern considered to who? Who is the center of the map at this moment? How you doing, Minister Shante? Right? If we're talking about who we're talking about in this right at this moment in time, and who's going to lead to being Shem, and Shem's going to settle eventually in the land of Israel, right, in the land of Canaan, then the persons who are Ashkenaz, or the persons who are even Japheth, or the person who are coming out of Japheth, including even Gog, right, and we'll discover in a little bit Magog, they are considered to be northern people. But at this moment in time, Israel is, if an Israelite especially is being led to write this, right, Moses, and they're looking at the map and they're talking about these particular people, then it makes sense that that when they say northern people, they're looking north of themselves. Are we in agreement? I want to make sure, because that's a simple thing. However, it's one of those things that's not common sense, it's kingdom sense. If somebody's gonna lie to you, right, make sure that you catch the lie. If the person writing this says, hey, the persons who are north of where we stay are considered to be these people, then they can't be the same people that live where you stay. How you doing, Prince? All right. I think I don't think we have to go too much deeper into that, but I just want to make that, I'm going to say it one more time to ensure our accuracy. If we live here, others live here, others live here, others live here, and then I'm told, and then I write to you all saying, hey, there are these people who live above us. At this time, they're not even saying that they're false, they're going to take over, they're going to try to be you, blah, blah. At this moment, it's not even saying all that. All it's saying is that there's a group of people that live above you, right? They're considered to be northern. So anybody coming out of Jasher, when you start doing your research, you're going to discover, now they can be attached to, they can't even marry into, they can influence other places, but they say as far as a people, as far as a nation, they tell you everybody coming out of Gomer, everybody coming out of Gog is who? North. That's their headquarters. That's their country. How you doing, Sister Taya? So it's important that we catch that, right? Because if you miss that, right, if that's not your foundation on this, some of this other stuff not going to make sense. So even places like Tarsus, and when you start looking up these places, Tarsus and Javan and all these places, and even Magog and Gog, you'll discover that they are considered to be municipalities and districts of the Mersin province in Turkey and modern Turkey, or the Ottoman Empire, or Eastern Rome. And if we just do a quick read through, if you keep on reading down into Genesis chapter 10, verse 5, you will discover something that tells you who these persons are. Who is it that they were considered to be not by the persons who will become that when Yahashua is around? Who was it that Moses considered these? What did Moses and them call these persons back then? Right? Because everybody wants to talk about they're just non-believers. But no, it's telling you there's a specific tribe of northern believers. If we go to Genesis chapter 10, verse 5, somebody tells me, where is it that these isles or these islands, right? They tell you, where is it that the islands are that these persons live? So it's not even that they live north of Israel, but we can even point to the fact it says they lived north in islands. They didn't live where you lived. Uh-oh. Correct? If you have Genesis chapter 10, verse 5, anybody does, I'd rather you type it in. Somebody type it in first, and then I'll repeat what you say. Right? Because I want to make sure that this is right there in your word. Anybody watching this, how you doing, Chantel? If you have your Bible open or your app open, etc., if you know from memory, Genesis chapter 10, verse 5, it says that these sons of all these persons, but they were the isles. They became the islands. They lived in islands. They became the isles. These are where the nations went to. They were the isles of the who? Of the Gentiles. Thank you. Right? So even this whole idea of Gentile having to be non-believer, and I ain't talking about that yet. It's not talking about them trying to take over, blah, blah. At this moment in time, Moses is saying, we know of these persons. They will eventually be known. Like by the time of Moses, he says, we know that these are Gentiles. Doesn't mean they're black, white, whatever. No, they're Gentiles, gens. They are a particular type of people who are developing a culture on these islands. And if you do some more research, you'll discover some of these islands might even be places that might shock you, like the island of England, considered to be Gentiles, or, what it would have been called before England and all the other stuff it got called, right? But if you look also too, what also could be considered islands that are north of Israel, you've got a whole little water source in between Africa and Europe and Asia right there. Look at the islands and you'll discover where these Gentiles went. And then these northern people sailed from the islands they were at and kept on going forward. And Europe, of course, has many, many, many islands, right? Thank you, man. Love you. So when you're talking about these islands, it's saying that these Gentiles went up north to the islands. And it says that these islands, right, their lands are divided, everyone after his tongue, after their families in their nations, meaning that over time they develop different dialects. And then, of course, you have what? You have the splitting of these persons, right? This is all after the flood, and you have this stuff, and they tried to build before there was even going up north. Recall, everybody was trying to come together, and they were trying to build this. What was it? They were trying to build the Tower of Babel. Their language is scattered, and so now they're divided. They go to their islands, and they keep moving up north. That is not to say that nobody else of Shem or nobody else of Ham would eventually move up north. It's not to say nobody marries into each other, but we're here to make it plain that at the time of Moses, Gentiles were known. Right? How you doing, Brother Craig? So each one after their own. They were divided after their own what? Right? After their own tongue. Tongue also remember, tongue can mean nation as well, because what you speak is your nation. So after their own tongue and their families, they kept family together. We're to separate by family, and what? And also in their nations. Very clear. So before then it starts talking about Ham. And then of course we can talk about Shem. So it's very clear here that we're not talking about something Hamitic, or what many of you will eventually refer to as African. We're not talking about something that is Shemitic, which are the children of Israel and many others, including Hebrews, because Hebrews come out of Shem, right? Hebrews do not come out of Shem. So the language of Hebrews doesn't come, I'm sorry, Hebrews come out of Shem. It does not come out of Japheth. But therefore, the language of the Hebrews do not come out of Japheth, correct? I'm just saying, right? We got to, well, let's make kingdom sense. I know it might seem like I'm trying to string you along. I promise you I'm not. I'm not disrespecting anybody. I want to ensure that we have the correct mindset and the righteous mindset. So now that we've gotten this with Gog and Magog, basically we're gonna get in just in a second. Right, I got some information for you. I also want you guys to know, even when you hear some of these terms that you're reading, or some of the nations that you're reading in Genesis chapter 10, concerning Japheth, and then concerning specifically Gog and Magog, not only will you see stuff like Tarsus, but also too when you look up further what they're talking about, what the names of some of these persons are, and what these nations are called today, you might run into something even called Cappadocia. As I just said earlier, all these places basically are going to be regions that are going to be in Turkey. Turkey, once again, was before it was Turkey, it was even bigger. It was the Ottoman Empire. Before it was the Ottoman Empire, it was even bigger. It was the Roman Empire, right? It was the Eastern Roman Empire. Before that, it was the Roman Empire. So, and we're dealing with, but so when we're dealing with this stuff, we're dealing with places when they're saying these things along the road, they're talking about Gentiles, right? Known in Moses' time as Gentiles. Not known in our time, not known what we call them today, not what we're trying to know. Moses and them, had you referred to a Gentile, they would have realized you're talking about a different set of people, and they're considered to be northern, right? So so we have to make sure, right? Hey, truth be told, how you doing? I don't even know where you're going with that. I guess if it's a rip or whatever, you got to step up your game. But I appreciate you for being on. I appreciate your life, even if you don't give me the same accord, or things do the same accord. How you doing, Jose? How you doing, Sister Knight? So when we're dealing with this stuff, we have to realize, even when we talk about Cappadocia, when we talk about Tarsus, when we talk about Tarshish, when we're talking about Javan, when we're talking about many different places that are all over the place, we must recognize very quickly that we can see where these persons are, right? We know where they went, or at least we have a great hint as to where they went. I see you. Thank you, moderators. So we comprehend where this stuff is headed, right? Also, too, Magog. Let's not just talk about Gog without Magog. Now, I want to make it clear too, because there's some things that actually fall into place or are kind of confusing. So there are persons that believe that Gog and Magog are giants, right? Are the what persons consider to be Nephilim, right? And this is not so, but I'll tell you where it comes from. Okay, it comes from actually somebody else's culture, not of our own, but another culture, in which there is somebody named Quirinius and Gog Magog. Now, be careful about anybody that mentions Gog Magog, because they're worshiping, but this is them modifying even an idol worship already, which makes it confusing. So Gog and Magog eventually at some point not just only physically exist, but also they have a spirit, and there will be a spirit of Magog, Gog and Magog, that will come and fight Israel, the northern people fighting against Israelites. That's biblical. That's what we're already dealing with in Genesis chapter 10. But if you hear there's Corineus, and so you would spell his name like this: Corineus. Cori, like the beginning of Corinthians, Corineus. Corineus or Corineus, whichever way you like to pronounce it. I'm not sure which one is better. But Corineus, um, he richly valued honor and exerted whole strength and force in the defense of liberty and country. So the city of London, right? The city of London, remember London being Gentiles, right? Being in tune with a name that would translate, right? Gog, Magog, they would know of this being their culture, this being something even those who would appropriate the culture would still keep some of this stuff around because of of idols that they decided to pick up and worship. Coroneus richly valued the honor and exerted the whole strength and force in defense and liberty of the country so the city of London, right, basically decided to make an idol out of him. It's very important, so don't miss this. So they call it Gog Magog. Now, where you get this is Coroneus over time becomes somebody that they make stories and stuff like that. And he kind of becomes almost like a Paul Bunyan type figure, or maybe even their version of Goliath, but he fights on behalf of them. And so now he becomes this big, huge, tall person. So when you get this thing as far as, oh yeah, Gog and Magog and giants, well, the giants were already finished before the flood. There are some persons who do carry some of the Nephilim DNA. So we do see some stuff. And there are giants who have existed since the flood, right? That being said, though, the giants, right, that we're talking about as far as the people and this and that, they're not the same as Gog and Magog. Could they have some of the DNA? Sure. But that's like saying, well, everybody, because if you take Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, and then the 3 wives, you already have different nations, right? So there can be different things in the bloodline, right? There can be things that still existed. There's different spiritual things over time that tried to exist and tried to go ahead and overtake somebody and went back into somebody. There's like twists and turns we can go through with that. But long story short, the Gog and Magog that make us go straight to giants for many of us usually comes from Coroneus, him being made a heroic symbol, persons gathering around him, lifting him up, worshiping him becoming a tall, literally and figuratively, a tall figure in the story of their journey as a people. And so now those who are getting an English or even getting a Ashkenazi or getting a Gog and Magog or getting a Japhetic influence, that's where your mind goes. How you doing, Minister Morel? Right? That's where your mind goes. But the reality is it didn't come from our culture, it didn't come from origins. It's not original. We shouldn't even think of it as such. We should go ahead and deny that thought process. We should teach against it. We should dispel it, because that's not the same people. The only reason why you're thinking about it that way is because of Coroneus, and then them still keeping the idols of Gog and Magog, mixing the two together. And so now all of a sudden it becomes Coroneus and Gog Magog are 2 brave giants. Right, it even went past that. Now, anything past that, I'm being honest, I have not read. I was going to try to before, but I did not get a chance to read or even look at a movie or see if I could find something specifically. But if you've even researched stuff about like heroic figures, or even there's a movie that really blow your mind. I know that I've gotten a lot of suggestions. We haven't done a watch party in a long time. I know I've gotten a lot of suggestions for him. And I'm going to make sure that some of the suggestions that we do, we just haven't had time. One of the first watch parties, if it's still on Netflix, I'm not sure if it'll still be on by that time. Prayerfully, it will be on. I'd like to do a watch party sometime soon. Might maybe even do like I don't know. I'd like to do a watch party sometime soon. And when we do it, I'd actually like for us to watch a movie on Netflix. It's not a great movie, but it's called Trolls. I'm pretty sure it's called Trolls, not to be confused with the animated Trolls movies that have been out, but it's actually called Trolls. And it's not the greatest of acting and stuff, but at the same time, the visual effects are amazing, and you will discover a lot of stuff concerning what we're talking about today, the Gog and Magog stuff, or this Coroneus type stuff, or making trolls or these giants heroic, or them being a different group of persons. And hey, if we had for them, the story what they do, which is very interesting, it's kind of, I won't say cool because we don't like to uplift it, but I'm being honest, as a nerd, as a history nerd, it's kind of interesting and cool, because what they do is they actually come from a cultural perspective. They say, hey, we believe that there's these trolls that are basically giants, and they have power and stuff, but they like humans, blah, blah. And they were actually around when we were in our pagan ways. Like they'll just straight up say, like, when we were considered to be pagan and we were pagan people, not pagan religion, not pagan as far as you're a heathen. No, no, no. We were actually pagan people. And then when we got away from our pagan ways and we started to allow Christianity to come into the kings, and we started mixing paganism with Christianity, we lost a lot of stuff, including we started off in the trolls who had this power and were nice to us. And so they make they're making idols literally out of stone. You'll see it if you haven't seen the movie already. I don't want to give too much away, but it's a very interesting path that they take. How you doing, Stephen? How you doing, Tanisha? How you doing, Olivia? It's a very interesting path that they take through all this stuff as they're talking about the story of those particular people. I can't remember what country it is, Icelandic or something like that, right? You've seen it, yeah. So it's a very interesting take. I wouldn't say it's the greatest movie, but it's like to sit and watch it and listen and then know the culture and then hear what they're saying. You're like, oh, Okay, like they're taking you through, like they're obviously not saying every single thing and being faithful to every single fable or anything, but they're making it a point to be like, hey, we're going to take you through this and how it was looked at and how persons didn't like what Rome was doing when they took over and Christian values and mixing of iron and clay. They rather just go ahead and be iron or go ahead and be something different than iron and be their own thing rather than listen to the clay, the word of Yah, or listen to some weird mixture of iron and clay coming together calling it Christianity. So it's very interesting. And even like okay, I won't give it away. But there's even some stuff that they do in the movie where something that's attached to church, if it's even seen or heard, the giant gets the ogre or the troll or whatever it's called. It might be called ogres. I think it's called troll. But he even gets irritated just at the look of it. And then you'll see some other stuff later that I definitely don't want to give away. But how you doing? Way of feeling. So when you see this stuff, it's very interesting. It's a very interesting dynamic. But that's a Gog Magog piece. Yeah, we definitely gonna have to watch that one. But that's a Gog Magog piece. Very interesting what they put in there. How you doing, Sister Tia? ¿Cómo está, mi hermana? Gracias por la presencia. So yeah, so getting back to Gog and Magog, right? And answering this question. So you'll see a lot of stuff like that that kind of shows you what the belief system is. All right. Now I'm just going to read through something. Please forgive me. I forgot to make sure. I think it's BibleGateway.com has this if you want to look it up for yourself. But it says Gog is a ruler of Magog. So at some point, it's not just um Gomer and Magog, but there actually becomes a person named Gog. But this Gog is kind of known as Gomer, even spiritually. If you don't want to give anything else, if you don't want to even link them to the same people, that Gog came from Gomer and then ruled over Magog, then you still have to realize that Gog and Magog is almost like saying Sodom and Gomorrah. It's almost like saying, Brooklyn, Bronx. It's almost like saying DMV, DC, Maryland, Virginia. It's almost, you see what I'm saying? Like, you can't really get rid of them. It's like saying Chicago, Illinois. Like if you on the outskirts of Chicago, you kind of sort of Chicago. You influence definitely, right? So it's kind of the same mindset. How you doing, Sister Car? It's kind of the same mindset going on here. So you can't really get rid of one without the other. You have to have both. How you doing, Sister Car? I'm sorry, I said that already. Excuse me. So Gog and Magog, right? Gog. Actually, somebody gets named Gog, and then at a certain point they become the ruler of Magog and the prince of Meshech and Tubal. If you notice, those are names that are in Genesis chapter 10 and verse 5. The demonic and sinister leader of those who are not like Elohim nations, right, are far distant from Israel. People of the north, not distant from us, but also distant in the ways that they practice. And Gog, right, at this point, whom he leads in a final assault against the people or the nation of Elohim, but is ignominiously, I always mess that name up, that word, please forgive me, defeated by the intervention of Yahweh upon the mountains of Canaan or Canaan, right? So they try to come into Canaan, they try to come into our land, but they are defeated, okay? The conflict is described once again in Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39. So when we see, can these dry bones live? They were lit. We were saying, can they live? Can they come back together? Why? Because there's going to be a battle against Gog of Magog or Gog and Magog, depending on how you're looking at it through the lens. Okay. And that's and in summary form, it's summarized again, what in Revelation chapter 20, verses 7 through 9. So let's go to Revelation chapter 20 real quick. We're going to read verses 7 through 9. So then it's then summarized again. So whether we want to say, hey, this already happened, this is one of those things in the Bible that's already happened, but it's a foreshadowing or a prophecy, even if you will. How you doing, Sister Snet? It's a foreshadowing or a prophecy of things to come. Correct? You see, so we have to acknowledge the word and we have to look at it holistically. That's why we said you can't just go ahead and do stuff without it, right? So we got to make sure that we know about these things that are happening. So we've already talked about Genesis chapter 10, verse 5, right? Or really verses 3 through 5, something like that. We talked about Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39, right? And now we're going to go ahead and get into Revelation chapter 7 through 9. The same spirit, So let's look at what's going to happen. Verse 7, it says, and when the 1,000 years are expired, so this is after Hasatan has been locked up. So this spirit is going to develop while he's being locked up. This spirit, these persons are going to remain satanic and remain open and remain usable by the Satan, even when they can't find them for 1,000-year reign. This is, so we're not even there yet, but this is the ability these persons have. This is the way they've set up the nation. Even when they see the Laquia, right, roll back like a scroll, they will still decide. Those of them that decide, and they'll be weeping and gnashing their teeth and all that, and make it through that, and basically have to walk around and stuff like that, and decide, will they have the sign of the devil, or will they have all this stuff? There's going to be 1,000-year reign, though, in there of peace, and Yehoshaphat is going to be ruler. And these persons are still going to have in their heart, they're still going to try to set, they're still going to have a northern people or a northern nation mindset to remain separate from the Most High and his people. So it says in verse 7, Revelation chapter 20, verse 7, and when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison. Right? Because remember, he's not in charge of hell. He's not in hell right now, but when he ends up locked up in hell, right, he'll have to stay there for 1,000 years. And then when he comes out, he's going to come out irritated and ready to go, right? So verse 8, he says, and shall go out and deceive the nations. Now, I want you to recognize, even though we're talking about something that's going to be, that is future tense, it does not mean that we should not recognize the present tense, right, implications. Just like if something is present tense doesn't mean that there are not past tense implications. How you doing, Cutie Pie? How you doing, Brother Vincent? How you doing, WIT? See, this is why some of us are in the situation that we're in, right? Somebody says, hey, you know, this happened. How does it affect the present? Somebody says, I didn't have anything to do with that. I don't want to hear that, blah, blah. But just because we're in the present tense doesn't mean that the past tense does not affect us today. I'm on, right? Okay. So if he's going to deceive the nations, if the Satan is going to deceive the nations, when he comes out, it doesn't mean that he's not trying to deceive the nations now. He's going to simply continue where he left off and going to pick up the pace, knowing that he's closer to being thrown in the lake of fire. Right? So if we recognize that he's going to deceive the nations, then we'll recognize he's deceiving the nations now. Just want to throw that in there, right? But verse 8, and shall go out and deceive the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth. So he's not going to leave one quadrant alone. He's going to make sure he goes to all quarters of the earth. Right? And watch this. But he's going to the four quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog. He's going to a particular people. How you doing, Big Brother Thomas? How you doing, Trini? All right, watch this. Catch this now. He's going to the four corners of the earth, but then it says Gog and Magog. So whether you're talking about Gomer at this point and Magog, right? Whether you're talking about Gog, the person who's named after Gomer, and then who's the king of Magog, it says that he's going to go to the four quarters of the earth. How you doing, Minister Bertram? And he's going looking for Gog and Magog, right? This family, this nation, this belief system of northern people who have now expanded themselves, who have now gone in different places. They have gone all over the place. And so he's going to go to gather them together. This is what it says in verse 8. He's going to Gog and Magog to gather them together to battle, the number of whom as the sand of the sea. So these persons that have gone around and are going to become, so this is not just talking about white folk. This is talking about anybody who's grafted in, because just like we can be grafted into Israel, or we are Israel, others can go around as well. So Gog and Magog, who is scattered all over the place, it says the Satan's going to go and gather his people for one last fight. Against who? Us. Because once again, who does Gog and Magog, either who are they or who do they represent? They represent who? They represent the northerners who are against Israel and have tried to fight us before in times past, and even thought that they had us. But in Ezekiel 37, dry bones came together. Ezekiel 38 and 39, we defeated them and went back to our culture and our purpose. And we're going to have to do the same thing again. That also means in between time, you must be preparing yourself for that, or see that Gog and Magog is still in existence. Gog and Magog is still doing the same thing. Gog and Magog is still waiting on satanic rule. See, because the Satan is not in hell. Now catch this now. I know this is a little extra, but catch this now, right? Because if the Satan is not in hell yet, and we're talking about what's going to happen after he gets out, that means that he's around. What does it say that your enemy is trying to do in 1 Peter? It says that the devil is a roaring lion going around seeking whom he may devour. He's going already. He's walking around, going looking for Gog and Magog, and then using them to devour. Oh my greatness, right? It's serious. So we have to recognize if that's what he's been doing, and that's what he's gonna do. What do you think he's gonna do in between? You know how somebody say something to you, they tell you, man, so and so was lying, and you be like, man, they been lying, right? In other words, like I'm not shocked. I'm not. Why would I be shocked that they lying? I know they're gonna lie, and that means they've been lying. They gonna lie now. Why would I believe them unless I see a change? All right. How you doing, Sister Monica? So we got to get on track with that. So it says they'll be like the sand of the sea. And when they, and watch this, verse 9, though, same thing as what happened in Ezekiel 30, 38, and 39. And they went up on the breadth of the earth and compassed the camp of the saints about. So we are where we're supposed to be. He goes and he finds those that are anti us still. They come around us ready to fight, right? And the beloved city, and fire came down from Elachim out of heaven and devoured them. And then verse 10, the devil that deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are and shall be tormented day and night forever and ever. So we already know what's going to happen with him. That also means we know what's going to happen with Gog and Magog. So you have an opportunity to get out of Gog and Magog. By the way, remember Ezekiel 36, Ezekiel 35, excuse me, talks about the fact that we have to preach against the mountain of Esau. Well, also you'll discover here's the Esau, Gog, and Magog kind of correlation. So Ezekiel 34 says we have false preachers that won't preach against Esau. Ezekiel 35 says we must preach against the mountain of Esau, right? Remember, Ezekiel 36 says then we get ourselves together. Ezekiel 37, dry bones live. Ezekiel 38 and 39, we come out from, we defeat Gog and Magog. But here's the interesting thing. Here's the kicker. Gog itself, right, actually is referring to the king at this point in time, right? It's not just Gomer anymore, but Gog is actually the king of the land of Magog, who will come from the north and attack the land of Israel. That's exactly what it means. At this point, when we get to Ezekiel 38 and 39, it is the king. So Gog is important because you got to know who the leadership is. And what does he represent as far as what Gomer did? See, Gog at this moment, Ezekiel 38, that's the leadership of Magog. And his name actually means mountain. So Ezekiel 34, these preachers are false. They're going to mess you up. Ezekiel 35, get some preachers in order to preach towards and against the mountain of Esau. Fast forward to Ezekiel 38 and 39, Gog is the mountain. Did you catch that? I'm going to say it again. All right. How you doing, Bradley? Thank you for being on. Right. So Ezekiel 34, we have preachers who will not preach against the mountain and against Esau, the spirit of Esau. Ezekiel 35, we must begin to preach against the mountain of Esau. Ezekiel 36, we get ourselves together. Ezekiel 37, dry bones can live, because Ezekiel 38 and 39, who are we fighting? We're fighting the king of the mountain. Matter of fact, the king himself is the mountain. So we must be willing to preach against the mountain. We must be willing to preach against their leadership. How you doing, Truth Behold? Salah. Are you willing to preach against their leadership? If Pastor so-and-so is antichrist, will you preach against it? Will you speak against it? Will you make sure your family is anti the mountain of Esau? That's what it's saying. Gog is the mountain. Amen. Sister Monica, you asked a question. Didn't even know we were going to take it there. I didn't know it was going to go there either. Then when we go to Magog, so he is now the representation of Gomer in a king who is the mountain, right? And Yahashua already told us, if you have the faith, you can say to the mountain, get up and leave and take yourself and throw yourself in the water. And if you do not doubt what you have said, what you said will happen, because that is his will, right? He said, as long as it be his will, you speak to the mountain. Well, he's talking about speaking to the mountain here. And now he's talking about this mountain who is who? Who is Gog. Now, Magog is the land north of Israel from which the king of Gog. So remember, he's actually the king of Gog technically, but then he takes over Magog. So he's over Gog and Magog. I don't think I've been saying that correctly. Okay. So the king of Gog / Magog, the whole thing now, when you hear Gog and Magog, is because one person, right? So the person who is Gog, he named himself after the country. He named himself after Gomer, that now is known as Gog. He then takes over Magog. So Gog and Magog are in lockstep. Hallelujah, right? And it says and now Magog, right, is the land north. So you got to look for the mountain, and you got to know what land it's in. Do you know what the mountain is? Do you know who the leadership is? Do you know who's at the peak of the summit, so that you can recognize who to speak against? But also, do you recognize the land that you are in, so you can be in the land but not of it? See, I've got to be in the land to speak to the mountain, but I don't have to be of the land, because I've got to speak against the mountain. Okay. I don't know if somebody caught that. I don't even know if I can say that again. Holy Ghost, have your way. I'm going to try. Look, I got to know the mountain so I can speak to the person who's at the summit. That being said, though, I have to get in the land, right? But I'm in the land, but I'm not of it. Why? Because I'm in the land to speak to the mountain, but I'm not of it, so I can speak against the mountain. See, the second that you're of the land, you can't speak to the mountain. Oh, my greatness. Okay, come on, somebody. Did you catch it? The second that I'm of the mountain, of the land, I can't speak against the mountain. This is why everything that they try. I'm sorry, what'd you say? Truly, I tell you, yeah, if anyone says to this mountain, go throw yourself into the sea, and does not doubt in the heart, but believes what they say. Yeah, come on now, right? Right? Thank you for the love. Look, so watch this. So when a lot of us have a problem with speaking against the leadership, because we're so embedded in the land. You can't speak against the mountain when you sleep at the foot of the mountain. You can't speak against the mountain when you look for the mountain for your shade. You can't speak against the mountain when you go into the mountain to get your medicine from it. You've got to at some point realize that if you're going to speak against the mountain, you cannot be of the land. You can be in the land, but you can't be of it, because the second you're benefiting off of it, benefits and privileges, taxable, right? The second that you're benefiting from it, you should be required to give back to it. That's just law. So you have to have a mindset of separation. Many of us have separation anxiety, but until you separate from the land, even mentally, you can never speak against the mountain. And some of you will never realize that you got a big old mountain. It's like what they call it, the pink elephant. Maybe we should call it the pink mountain, right? There's an elephant in the room. You telling me you can't see this elephant? You telling me you don't smell nothing funky? I don't care how clean an elephant is. Something funky gonna come out. Right? I don't care how awesome your home is. Put an elephant in there long enough, there's got to be a divot or a dent somewhere, right? You can't put the elephant on the third floor and think that we're gonna stay on the third floor that long. The creaking should give away that something's not going on. Well, here we have a big old pink mountain trying to talk about we're gonna possess the land, but if you're gonna possess the land has to be under new jurisdiction. You got to be in the land, but not of it, so you can speak against the mountain. All right. Whoever that's for you. Amen. So Gog means mountain. Magog actually translates into overtopping or covering. So the king, who is the mountain, is over Magog. Magog is your covering. Makes sense now, right? So remember, Ezekiel 34, preachers aren't preaching like they're supposed to. Ezekiel 35, Yah's going to get rid of them preachers, and he's going to have preachers that will speak towards the mountain of Esau, the spirit. Ezekiel 36, right? Ezekiel 36, we are going to get back to our culture. Ezekiel 37, dry bones will begin to live. Ezekiel 38 and 39, Gog, the king, the mountain will be, right, of Magog, of what covers you, at least what you've been forced into. Remember, you've been forced into the covering at that time and now, right? And you will come out of it and you will be victorious because Yahweh has already decided you shall be. How you doing, jellyfish jelly? Right? So the mountain, we have to have faith that we can speak against it, but you can't speak against what you part of. The mountain is embedded in the land. The mountain goes deeper than the land. So you got to have faith that you can remove the mountain, the king, the Gog, from the Magog, from your covering. See, you guys are going, you got to comprehend, you got to get rid of the king's mindset before you can get rid of the covering. People aren't just going to leave the system if they believe in the king. See, they're fighting against Kamala and against Donald, but if they recognize that both of them are under the same king, they would realize that you have to come out of the mindset of thinking one is better than the other when both have to report to the same master. When you get that mindset out of you, you will realize that voting doesn't even matter. And when you realize that the voting doesn't matter, you will live your life accordingly. Some of you are stressed out because you're trying to figure out who's going to be the next president. When it doesn't matter who will be the next president, Yahweh is your king. Why stress? So Gog means Gog is the king. He's the leader. He's the mountain. Magog is the land that the mountain is in. And you're going to have to remove Gog from Magog, at least spiritually, in order to comprehend that this land is not even something that's for you to possess necessarily until it's yours. It has to be in a new jurisdiction. You can't possess what's in somebody else's hand. That's called thievery. Right? If you win it in battle, we can at least say, hey, but even in battle, you have to have claim to the land. But if you win it in battle, that's different than I just stole it from you. See, it was yours in the first place. See, we're about to win in battle what was already promised to you. The land of Canaan that was already promised to you, to Abraham. The new land of Canaan, even flowing with milk and honey. You got to realize that that was already promised to you. The only reason why it was stolen from you is somebody who was kicked out is trying to have a kingdom or trying to be a mountain over your life. The Satan came and he messed up what Adam and Iazar, what you call Adam and Eve, right? What they had going on. And so he messed up your righteous birthright. This is your birthright. You got to kick him out of your mind and kick him off of your land. He has no place in your home. He has no place in your heart. He has no place in your desires. He has no name. He has no authority. Hence the term chasatan. How are you going to give place to somebody who has no place? How are you going to give authority to somebody who has no authority? That's not on him. That's on us. If we crazy enough to give somebody who has no authority in our lives, we got to take accountability. How you doing, Granny? And next, how you doing, Rahaj? All right. So that's Gog and Magog for the most part, right? If you keep on going from there, you'll be able to learn some other things. So I'll leave that there. Thank you to Sister Monica for giving us that question. I told you I would try to my best to answer it as quickly as possible. There's a lot of twists and turns that I can continue to go through, but we'll leave it there for today. All righty. Praise Yah. So now let's go to some other questions that we received. Oh, that's right. So I'm going to go off of memory. I have to go off memory. There were a bunch of questions that were from Patreon and names. It was not wanted that names would get out to you guys, even if others could see it on Patreon. I didn't want everybody knowing it in this venue. So I will not mention a person's name. It makes it a little difficult for me to look at the question for today, though, without revealing the name. So I'm just going to go off of memory of the questions. So if I miss a question, please forgive me. Maybe I can answer it on a one-on-one if I miss something or whatever, especially if you don't want, persons to know that it was you. And then after that, we'll try to open it up to whatever questions, comments, or concerns you have. Once again, today's not a typical Q&A. Today's a Q&A concerning our HI ways, if you will, right? Those of you who are of a certain family of believers who are Israelites and speak a certain language that we would call Avda, but people would call today Paleo Hebrew. And getting back to truth, we are going to speak to you all today. So I did get a list of questions, and I'll just go ahead and answer those things from the list of questions. Let's just go ahead and get into that now. So um, one of the questions was basically, I've heard that a certain group of things, especially written by Paul, Romans, Philemon, a lot of different stuff that they had listed and stuff. These things written by Paul, they should not be considered to be canon, and they are not New Testament. They don't follow anything. They don't follow laws. They don't follow certain things, this, that, whatever. Right. And I say this all the time. Paul is a very interesting figure. So remember, this is us talking about stuff from within our diaspora questions. If you have questions, comments, or concerns, and they don't fall in line with, hey, this is a Black Hebrew Israelite kind of thing that pops up and pops up. I'm not saying because you are, oh shoot, I just said the term, because you are HI, right? Um, right. I'm not saying just because you're HI, you can ask questions. I'm saying these are things that within our community are HI fights or things that certain persons believe different. And so I'm doing my best to be able to give you stuff according to truth. Okay. So if it doesn't fall in that category today, I will not, at least at first, I will not give it, um, I will not, I will not answer it today, just simply because we want to make sure that we are obedient to the assignment, which is to look at things from an HI perspective. So with Paul, I always say this off top. Paul is the most confusing person to read, especially if you are not coming from Paul's perspective. Paul is usually used like this. If you're somebody that believes it's only about Old Testament and New Testament doesn't matter that much, then you say don't listen to Paul. If you look at New Testament only, Paul is used to tell you why you should look at Old Testament. One of the first things we have to do, therefore, is realize that there is no such thing as Old and New Testament. Somebody wrote this in. So before somebody wrote in two words and put it before Genesis called Old Testament, so before somebody removed the Apocrypha and before somebody wrote in two new words, New Testament, we never looked at things as far as there's an Old Testament and a New Testament, because the Testament is basically the contract or even the covenant. And we had a covenant that we were supposed to enter into. We lost it when Adam and who we call Eve messed up. And so now all we've been trying to do is get back to it. Yehoshua said, I came not to destroy the law or the prophets. And one of the things that we mess up in that is we only think Mosaic law, but anything that the king decrees is law. So Mosaic law is a type of law under the law, right? But it is not the only law. And a lot of Mosaic law are laws that were already in place, right? A sacrifice was already in place. There were laws to talk about honor your parents. There were laws. There were writings. Even Abraham and Jasher, and Jubilee, right? Chapter 12. It tells you that he found the scrolls of his fathers, and angels downloaded the language that his physical father wasn't going to give to him, since his physical father was into idolatry, and Abraham had to go back to the scrolls of his fathers. So our Bible never started with Genesis. Genesis is the beginning for us, as far as, yes, it tells you what happened in the beginning, but Genesis is not the first scroll written by far. Now, do we have access to any of these scrolls or a lot of these scrolls? That's to be debated. But and I don't know if this is the platform, at least today, to debate it, right? But I would say that if you look and if you believe in the book of Jubilee, then you must discover, oh, there's scrolls that go back before Abraham, right? We just don't like to talk about these things. Especially, it's like when somebody says, read the book of Jasher. And then somebody goes, no, you shouldn't read anything out of the 66 books. It's like, but Jasher is mentioned by David. If David says, read the book of Jasher, then why don't we read the book of Jasher? Is not every word of the Bible supposed to be true? Right. So, there's a lot of that goes on. But that being said, Paul is very confusing if you don't come through the right culture. Paul is very confusing because, once again, if you're somebody who's trying to just say Old Testament only, you'll say Paul is the reason why therefore you must falsify everything he's ever said. If you say New Testament only, then you have to falsify everything Paul said. If you believe that in both, Paul doesn't change, right? Like if you believe in what Paul said, Paul doesn't change. Paul makes it a point to say Romans 1:11. Here's the Roman road, right? One of the books that they said you should get rid of. Here's a quick version of the Roman road. Romans 1:11. He says, I write this that I might help you to be established. Why? Romans chapter 2. start talking about law is necessary. Romans chapter 3, verse 1. Is there an advantage to being circumcised? Is there an advantage to being a Jew? Yes, there is. He starts talking about law again, right? He says that people can be grafted in, though. And he says that no matter if you had the law or not, right? All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of Elohim. What does the word glory mean? It means heaviness, weight, or imprint. So something that should have been imprinted upon us, we lost it, right? And he's coming to stir up something and that he might be able to make sure we are established, some spiritual gift we should have always had, but we lost it because we got away from law, at least the true meaning of law. When you start going to Romans chapter 4, you'll start discovering more about law. You'll even start getting into the heart. And is it the circumcised heart or the uncircumcised heart? Now we know that circumcision is obviously talking about the fact that you're dealing with a certain group of persons, but also the circumcised heart is talking about the ability to take your flesh away from your passion concerning the law. Right? If you have a circumcised heart, the law can penetrate and you can get it correctly. If you have an uncircumcised heart, the flesh messes it up, and therefore you'll come up with stuff more out of your flesh than out of what Yahweh spoke from before the foundations of the world. Romans chapter 5, you get into that, you start seeing that. Therefore, I'm going to say it out of order. What is it that we glory? We glory in tribulation. I'm saying it wrong. We glory in something in tribulation because tribulation brings about hope. I just said it wrong. Let me turn there. Was that Romans 5:5, I believe, or somewhere around there? Romans 5:4. I just said that wrong. Excuse me. Let me say that correctly. Let me get us where we're supposed to be. Our Holy Ghost take us where we're supposed to be. All right. Romans chapter 5, verse 3. Excuse me. And not only so, but we glory in tribulations. Right. Right. So we have access by faith into his grace. This is the same Paul's going to say faith without proper works is what? Is DOA. But we do have access by faith into his grace. But verse 3, and not only so, but we glory, we have a heaviness or weight or an imprint, or we even put our weight or imprint, we show Yah what we have, either way you want to look at it, interdependent. And not only so, but we glory in tribulations also. Tribulations put something on us. And these tribulations, knowing that tribulation worketh patience. Now we become patient, right? And patience, experience. Now we have more experience in the law and in the ways. And therefore, this experience brings about hope, right? Which we're supposed to be able to tell person the reason why we hope and what we hope in. And hope maketh us not ashamed, because the love of Elohim is shed abroad in our passions, in our love, in our hearts by Holy Ghost, right? By Ravak HaKodash, which is given unto us, right? So in these things that we have, we recognize what's going on, right? And so that's Romans chapter 5, excuse me. And therefore we get to after that, we therefore see that Yahashua, he commended his love to us, that while we were yet sinners, right, he gave up the ghost for us. Okay. And we know that this is important because Romans 6:22 tells us that we are free, right? But Romans 6:23 says, for the wages of sin, there was a payment that was necessary, right? Lawfully speaking, if you sin, there's a payment that's due. The wages of sin is what? Is death, but the gift of Elohim is life eternal. And how you doing, Alicia? I don't know if that's Evangelist Alicia or not, but welcome, right? So we know this to be true. We know this to be accurate. Romans 6:22, Romans 6:23. Now we get to this place of where we start going deeper into law. Romans chapter 7. Paul asked the question, is the law sin? That means, does the law fall short? How you doing, Yasanma? How you doing, Wavy Davy? Is the law sin? In other words, does it fall short? Does it miss the mark? Is it sinful to be obedient to the law? That's Romans chapter 7. What does Romans chapter 7 say? What did he say after that? He says, no. He says, Elohim forbid. That's right. Forbid that mindset. Forbid that thought process. Is the law sin? No. Elohim forbid. If that is your mindset, get it out. In the same chapter, he begins to talk about how he says, look, if, as a matter of fact, the same verse of Romans chapter 7, he begins to say, hey, if it wasn't for the law, I would actually be full of lust. Remember, Paul is single, right? He's decided to be a bachelor for the entirety of his life, right? And Paul says, if it was not for the law, I would be what? I would be full of lust. Why? Because he says the 10th commandment says, thou shalt not covet. So if I know not to covet, which means to want something, right? Because Yahweh says that he provides all our needs according to his riches and glory. And David says, I once was young and now old now, and I've never seen the righteous forsaken nor his seed begging bread. David also said, Yahweh is my shepherd, I shall not want. Want means to lack. So Paul says, if I know that I'm not supposed to want because Yah's already taking care of my needs, then I don't look for anything that's outside of my needs. And if Holy Ghost has told me that I'm going to be a bachelor for the rest of my life, then why would I look for anybody to be with me like that? I'm okay with being with myself. I'm okay with going through whatever stuff happens with my body, even as far as wet dreams, stuff like that. I'm all right with being who I am. I'm all right with discounting. I'm all right with averting my eyes because I know what I'm called to be. So I don't want anything. I'm not saying everybody has to be a bachelor or a bachelor, right? Or a bachelorette. I'm just saying in Paul's case, he's saying, I don't lust after things. Why? Because there's a law that says do not covet. And when I recognize that the law says do not covet, how would I let it get to the point of lust? Right? Paul is very consistent. Then Paul, even within Romans chapter 7, he starts saying stuff like, the law is without sin, the law is pure. He says the law is holy, and he says the commandments are holy. In the same chapter, Paul makes it a point to even go to the place of even talking about, hey, if he says, look, man, I'm be honest with you. The things that I want to do are the things I never do, feels like. And the things that I don't want to do seems like the things I always be doing. And he says, I realize that I have two laws. He talks about there's a spiritual law. As much as I know you don't want to hear the spiritual Israel, blah, 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 and I get that. But hear what I'm saying. Paul says there's a spiritual law, a law of the spirit, and a fleshly law, a law of the flesh. And if we recognize what he was talking about already, there's the circumcised heart that allows the spirit to the law of the spirit to go directly to the heart, then we recognize that if you have a uncircumcised heart, then you're going to have the law of the flesh. And he says there's two different things. He says the law of the flesh is the one that makes him want to do right, but still end up doing wrong, and never want to do wrong and end up still doing right, so to speak. If you get what I'm saying. I know I just said a confusing manner, prayerfully caught what I said. Right? So Paul made it a point to talk about the importance of law. And then on top of that, Romans chapter 8, verse 1, Paul then goes into saying something that we'll miss if we only start there. This is our first affirmation. We have several affirmations that we ask people to do daily or at least weekly or think about every once in a while. Now we haven't really done a teaching on it in a while. We have to go through that at some point again, just the affirmations. But Paul makes it a point to say, hey, Romans chapter 8, verse 1. He makes a point to say, therefore we are not under condemnation. Why are we not under condemnation? Why are we not under condemnation? We are not under condemnation. Why? Because we follow after the law of the spirit. Now, it just says there we follow after the spirit and not after the flesh. But we've just heard about circumcision, Israel, law, right? Having a circumcised heart so law can get there. So if you have a circumcised heart and the spirit of the law of the spirit is hitting you, not the law of your flesh, but the law of Yahweh's spirit, or the law of through HaKadosh is coming. Well, then what it's saying is, therefore, because we are under the law of the spirit, we are not under condemnation. But those who are under the law of the flesh, making up your own stuff, you shall be condemned. I mean, this is law. In the same spirit, right? That was lawful to raise Yehoshua from the dead after he did what? After he was obedient to the death of the cross, to give him a more excellent name, that at the name of Yehoshua, every knee will bow, things in earth, above earth, underneath the earth, and things, and everybody will confess that Yehoshua HaMashiach Adon. That same Holy Ghost who obeyed the law, because Yehoshua obeyed the law and gave him the authority or the name within law to be able to be a law nurturer, giver, taker, etc. Right? When I say taker, to mean to write it out or to say what is law, right? Then on top of that, he says that same Yehoshua, right? I'm sorry, that same Holy Ghost who raised Yehoshua has the ability to what? To quicken your mortal bodies lawfully. If you follow the law, you can be quickened and go from mortality into immortality. Romans 8:18 then says, so the suffering, the things we choose to go through, right, in this present time are not worthy to be compared to the glory, that same thing that now through the law is an imprint, a heaviness upon thee, the glory which shall yet be revealed. And Romans 8:19 says that the creature, not everybody is this, but not everything, this is not for everybody. Remember, the creature, the creation is waiting on the manifestation of the children or the sons of Elohim. Now we get to verse 28. Therefore, what? All things work together for tabah, for morality, for those who achaba or act according to Yahweh's word or love him and are called, invited according to his purpose. Then you go into Romans 10, verse 1, where Paul says, it is my prayer that Israel might be saved. Romans 10:2. But even though it's my prayer, not all of Israel, they have a zeal for Elohim, but it is not according to intimacy or according to knowledge. So now Romans 10:3 behind that is not according to intimacy or to knowledge. So now what happens after that? Romans 10:3, it says we got into everybody else's culture and we left our culture alone. But we need to get back to Christ, who is the end of the direction, or even the door for us to enter into the kingdom of heaven. Romans 10:5 then comes behind that and says you got to get back to the law of Moses. Romans 10:6 and 7, I have no heaven or hell to put you in. But Romans 10:8, this is of extreme importance. Why? Because Romans chapter 10 and verse 9, Yehoshua has to be who you confess as your Lord. And the word confession there, confess, means to be one with what you fessed up to, fess up. Say what has been said, say what has been done. So are you one with what has been said? Are you one with what has been done? But also, then Romans chapter 10, verse 9 is also saying confess, even in the Greek context. It's talking about what? Homologio or homologia. Homologio is talking about homo, the same, logia, talking about the logic thereof, or the thought process, or even the study of. So if Yehoshua obeyed the law, here's Yehoshua now, Matthew chapter 5, Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 5, verses 10 through 12, right? Blessed are you when they revile you, rebuke you, and say all manner of evil against you falsely for my reputation or my namesake. When they do that, rejoice and be exceeding glad, for they did the same thing to the prophets that came before you. Matthew chapter 5, verse 17 through 20. Yehoshua says, I came not to destroy the law or the prophets. I came to fulfill or to put it into effect, not to destroy it. And then on top of that, he says, we should not change one jot or tittle. We should not change the most minuscule of measurements or even the way it is written. Then he comes behind that and says, those who do not live by the law and teach others not to live by the law are considered to be the least concerning kingdom standards. But those that live by the law and are considered to teach others how to live by it, they're considered to be the greatest concerning kingdom standards. And then verse 20, he said, you should know the law greater than those who write it, the scribes, and those who are supposed to preach it, the Pharisees, because you should know the law for yourself, even if, how you doing, Sister Sheila, even if you don't recognize, how can I say this? Even if you don't recognize how or how to use the law, you should at least know it so that somebody can't just come by and say something random, right? Like you might not know Ezekiel 37 in context of that, but you should at least know dry bones shall live. If you know dry bones shall live, then I can't take you on something crazy, right? If you know Ezekiel 37 is talking about dry bones living, and you know Ezekiel 36 says we're getting back to culture, then somebody like myself should just be able to come and connect the dots like we did earlier. Ezekiel 34, preachers are preaching bad. Ezekiel 35, we got to preach against Esau. Ezekiel 36, you got to realize we got to come back into our culture. Ezekiel 37, once we do, dry bones shall live. Ezekiel 38 and 39, right? We shall fight against Gog and Magog. Really, Ezekiel 38 and Ezekiel 39, we are victorious, right? But if you know the law, then it's easy for you to be like, okay, I can listen. A lot of persons don't know the law at all. And so you have to just trust. And look, I praise y'all that you trust me. I believe I've made myself trustworthy. I know that I'm giving you the word. I give you a bunch of stuff to cross-reference. That being said, you should always do your best to know as much of what you're getting into. How you doing, Sister LaCrystal? You said, so we are truly supposed to be living to worship, not to do anything else. And really, worship is just extreme respect. But yeah, like when you pick trash up off the ground, you worship. When you teach your child to do great, you worship. When you become the best version of yourself according to the will of Yah, you worship. When you're a living sacrifice, you worship. When you speak against wickedness, you worship. When you curse wickedness, you worship. Worship really, in its essence, is just talking about extreme respect. right? So anyways, going back to Ezekiel, sorry, going back to Romans chapter 10, right? Verse 9. So to confess means to have the same logic. So if Christ, oh, I'm sorry. So we're still in Matthew chapter, the Sermon on the Mount. Now let's go over to, so Matthew chapter 5, verse 10 through 12, we talked about with law, that's Christ. Matthew chapter 17 through 20, we just talked about law, that's Christ. And then Christ says in Matthew chapter 7, verse 12, he makes it a point to say that he gives the golden rule, and many persons only live by half of the golden rule. The half that persons live is usually do unto others as you want done unto you, but that's not the golden rule. That is half of it. The entirety of the golden rule is do unto others as you would have done unto you. For what? What is the standard? For this is the law and the prophets. The same law and prophets that Christ said, I did not come against, and the same law and prophets that Yahushua says in Matthew chapter 10, 5, verses 10 through 12. Hey, when they speak against you because you speak what the prophet spoke, which is the law, rejoice and be exceeding glad. For they're doing the same thing to you that they did to the prophets. So you're in great company if they're saying that, hey, I don't like what you say because I don't like what the prophets say. I recall one of the times, it's been years now, but I recall one of the times we had some kind of debate that happened, and on one of the live sessions, and the guy starts saying stuff, and he's like, actually, this wasn't even in this one. It was something my wife was in, and then I kind of, came in and was allowed, to talk somewhat to bolster her point. And I made it a point to tell the person who was saying all this stuff. I'm telling him stuff, and I'm telling him about creation. I'm telling him about science and all this stuff. He goes, "Oh, you sound like Kent Hovind." And if you don't know who Kent Hovind is, he's a Christian, but he'll give you a lot of great knowledge and stuff concerning law, spirit, natural law, science, etc. And so he said, "You sound like Kent Hovind." I knew who it was right away. And so since I knew who it was, I didn't let that bother me. I said, "Oh." I said, yeah, I said, Kent Hovind, that's great company. I was like, did you think that was a diss? I told him, I was like, did you think that was something that would cause any kind of uh, any kind of cowering or wavering on my behalf or on my part, because on his behalf? I was like, no, like, you speak of Kent Hovind, I love Kent Hovind. I'll listen to Kent Hovind because you mentioned him. I'll probably listen to him tonight. Right? How you doing, Donovan? Thank you for the love. And how you doing? Use it 422-753-754, etc. But yeah, so I told him, I was like, oh yeah, I love Kent Hovind. Like, you thought that was gonna mess me up? But see, that's what happens a lot of times. Somebody will try to hit you with something and be like, oh well, you believe in that mess and blah blah. No, yeah, I do. That's we sound the same because we're in the same belief system. So when you say that, you're not saying anything that's messing with me. Matter of fact, I should sound like him if we're believing in the same thing, and I sit at his feet. So how you doing, JP? So anyways, so we get back now to Romans. So Romans 10:9, you have to confess. You have to have the same logic of Christ, and Christ had the logic of law. And then it says, and then you can believe that Elohim, not just believe in Elohim, but believe that Elohim raised him from the dead. Why is that important? Because you're a fellow heir. It's law. So if Christ passed, this is law. If Christ passed, and when he gave up the ghost, he had a name that was above every other name, right? And it says you can be a fellow heir to the reward, which is resurrection. But resurrection is what? Resurrection for eternal life and righteousness and so-called piety. Well, if we're going to be righteous in eternity, then we have to do the same things that Christ did. We are obligated, right? If we would like to have access to obtain the unsearchable riches of Yahushua at Yahweh, then we must also do what Christ did to the best of our ability. But since we cannot win the race because we are sinful, he won it already and said, just finish the race. You don't have to get in any order. You don't have to beat anybody. You don't have to be first, second, third. He said, I already won. And because I've won, I've decided to share my spoils with everybody. And my spoils are eternal life. Right? So now we get back to Paul. Paul is just saying the same thing. Matter of fact, when Paul says in the next verse, then you have to do what? By law. You have to realize that just because you're saved doesn't mean you have salvation, because you now are on your way to righteousness, right, lawful standing, and you're on your way to salvation, being salvaged. So just because you've got a lawful mind doesn't mean you're always lawful. And just because you like to be salvaged to live eternally in righteousness doesn't mean that you are there yet. You're on your way. This is why we have to preach it from this perspective. So a lot of persons automatically are already saying with Paul, this and that, they're going to say this, that, or whatever, but we don't even take into account what Paul is, what he says, how he talks about law, how he quotes a lot of stuff with law. Even if we had kept going in Romans chapter 10, by the time you hit verse 16, you'll recognize that he's literally quoting Isaiah. So how do we say that Paul is against Isaiah? All the teaching is wrong, all of it's fallible, right? We're not actually taking into account what he said. When we look at it through the proper lens, like we've been talking about with that microscope recently, when we magnify it and we look through the proper lens, we'll be able to get more out of it than somebody who's looking through somebody else's microscope. Amen. Right? Amen. All right. Another thing, please forgive me, I'm trying to go on top of my head. Another thing that was said, I promise we're going to open this up to everybody ASAP. I'm just trying to go through all the stuff. I'm going by memory for the most part, because I can't put the post up for you guys to see it without you seeing the name. Give me a second. I'm sorry. Hold on one second. Okay, I got it. Another big one, which is I've been asked before, even before today, and I'm asked regularly because when I'm led to, I do wear an ankh. So another one, which was where the ankh came from and the cross. And this is not even on the regular stuff because, to be honest, I usually answer this pretty quickly. If you know about culture, if you talk to somebody who's Cushitic, somebody who's from South Sudan, even some West Africans, but somebody from South Sudan, somebody from Kush, somebody from Ethiopia, Eritrea, certain parts of Kemet, not Egypt, but certain parts of Kemet, if you know the difference, different things like that, right? So when you look at those items and you look at those things, you will discover that the Ankh basically was something that came after the Tav. So before you focused on a cross, whereas the crucifixion, right, the crucifix, if you will, before it came from somebody else's culture, there was already a thing called the Tav. It's from the language of all creation, right? So in the language of all creation, the last character is Tav. So that character Tav literally tells us that we have everything that we're going to need as far as ending, perfection, stuff like that, maturity. So everything that was needed to be done was done on the Tav. We just think of cross, crucifixion, and so we only look at that context only, but not the fact that it was already promised from Badashayat, right? Bit out of Reshin Yao Tav, meaning that the son comes out the right family. That's the first word of the Bible. That's the first book of the Bible. Barashat, right? Bit out of Reshin Yao Tav, meaning what? That the son who comes out the right family, who's one with the Father, becomes our head by being destroyed, being led by the Holy Ghost to the Tav, or what we call the cross. So the Tav is not anything wrong for us to have. I've worn the Tav, as you guys have seen. I don't have it on me today, but I believe it was Sister Greta. She made a bracelet for me recently, and I put it up for you guys to see. And it's Aleph Tav, right? Which is basically saying that what you guys know in Greek is the Alpha and the Omega. But Tav is the last character. So it's saying he's the Aleph, the Father, the beginning, the first character, and he's the Tav, where it's completed, perfected on the so-called cross, right? He's the end. So Aleph Tav. So Tav is not a bad thing to say. It's not a bad thing to wear. It's cultural, though. Many persons are coming from a proper cultural perspective, right? So since many are not coming from that cultural perspective, you're not really going to see things properly. So a lot of us are coming through, and if you see even a lot of persons who wear crosses, right? They kind of go through a lot of hell and stuff from our community. Why are you wearing a cross? Blah blah this and that or whatever. But there's nothing that says that you cannot wear a tav, right? Now, if somebody says, "Well, you're wearing a graven image," well, then you shouldn't wear any shirt with letters on it. You shouldn't have any pictures of anybody of your family, right? You shouldn't. You see what I'm saying? Like we have to be careful with it. But I get now, but more so what I got um, from the question, and when I looked at the pictures and everything, it was talking about how we should, the Ankh thing, and the Ankh came first. It was supposed to be woman and man, and what a lot of persons do with that now is they go, well, so it went from being a woman, right? And a man, which somebody changed that from what it was, because the Ankh actually kind of was like a cursive version, if you will, or a different way of saying, of putting Tav together. Then somebody took that and started saying it was woman man, which by the way, there's nothing wrong with that anyways, right? Okay, I had no clue that was going to be happening today. Sorry. So anyways, so I'm sorry if y'all can't hear me. I'll try my best. So you have this thing of woman and man, and coming together. I don't know. I might have to move, y'all. I'm sorry. I had zero clue that this was supposed to happen today. I don't want to talk about stuff like that in front of y'all. We might have to move. I don't know. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes. So anyways, so you have the Tav or the Ankh. The Ankh was changed in the meaning, especially when Kemet takes over from Cush, and Kemet starts saying that it's a way of worshiping their netures, right? Because that was not original. I know everybody goes, oh no, that's what the Ankh. No. They changed it, right? But what you've heard now is like people say, well, the Ankh itself was supposed to be woman on top, man on the bottom, which once again, I have no problem with. It's, what it represents. But then they say it was the cross. Now this is what a lot of Afrocentric brethren say. The cross was just two phalluses, because the Ankh, the bottom was a phallus and it was straight, and the top was a circle, and maybe even had fallopian tubes or possibly arms on the side, but it was the woman up top and the man on the bottom. Now they're just saying it's two men and they put them over. It's a very homosexual thing of doing. Even somebody who I like to listen to a lot, Dr. Laia Africa, he says that, and I would say that there's not really truth in that, but it is what it is, right? So, and all these things that we're discussing that's happening, that's going on, with that, you have to recognize and realize that there was or not there was. I mean, it's a lie. It's not a true. What actually happened is that was already there, right? It was already there. It was already something that was used. And if you go to places like Ethiopia or Kush, right, Eritrea, South Sudan, Central Africa, et cetera, if you go to these places, you'll actually discover, if you go to, forgive me, I'm not trying to be racist, but if you go and park your car at a lot of places that are owned by a lot of Ethiopians, Sudanese persons, et cetera, when you go there, and if you wear, like if I happen to be wearing one, they'll tell me, hey, that's ours. When I went over to Africa, a lot of persons, hey, that's ours. When I went over to, a matter of fact, when I was walking around, there was a guy who was our host. He wanted to introduce me to this big name, big time bishop or whatever, where they were. I don't recall his name, but we went and, met him like in between services. It was a really nice edifice. We went in and everything, and we talked to him, whatever. He introduced me to him, and he goes, oh, I know what that means. And I'm like, and I just looked at him because, I wanted to kind of hear what he had to say. He goes, that's ours. And it also means that if we see you wearing it, it means you're a bishop. Because in their culture, right, they know that that's tav. And in their culture, that's it being complete. And if you get to a certain state, now I'm not a bishop, right? But and I know what bishop means, where it came from. But they know. So a lot of times we have this weird thing. That's why I said we have to be careful, even when trying to answer questions, that we come through the proper prism or the proper lens. Because a lot of times when we're having these conversations, we're not even recognizing we're using somebody else's way of thought. So somebody else who might be into some heavy homosexual activity, even Greek mentors and blah, blah, and all this stuff, right? But some of the stuff that you might want to, be careful about is to take what they're saying and then automatically apply it to your culture, not realizing that it's not yours. Just like we were talking about earlier with Gog and Magog, and how somebody, if you don't know what's going on with, Cornelius and Gog Magog, and not recognizing that's a English Japhetic slash English slash Japhetic slash Gogish slash Gomerish slash Magogish type principle, you'll try to bring that and be like, oh, well, then everybody in Gog and Magog, they were all giants. Cornelius and Gog Magog become two characters that they made up because of how much they love Cornelius, right? And so they say that they're going to fight on their behalf. How you doing, Sister Melissa? So there's a lot of different things that you have to recognize and realize very quickly what's going on with that. So if you want to wear a tav, right, which is the cross. Have at it. Like I said, I wear them on my wrist. I've told you guys I've really just been looking for one that I think is acceptable, because when people make crosses now, they do all this weird stuff on it, which is why I appreciate Sister Greta. Yeah, it's my God, for hooking me up, because she heard me keep saying it. So she blessed me. And once again, if you'd like some of her stuff, please make sure you sow into her as well. Um, but yeah, so but she made that for myself and my family as a gift, so that we could wear the tav. And she made olive tav, same as, or our the original version of Alpha and Omega, right? So I'm actually so a tav is okay to wear. What I would say is, as far as graven images, especially concerning what the Messiah looks like, I would be careful about a cross or a tav that has Yahashua or a Jesus on it, what they call a Jesus piece. I'd be careful about that, right? Where he's on there, right? Because that's a graven image. That's when we're getting into stuff like that we shouldn't be doing. You said our bishops, apostles, our culture. I only see the pastor in Old Testament and bishop in New Testament. So once again, you see the terms that they're using. You're having a Greek Hebrew type thing, which shouldn't be. Remember, because they're using Septuagint, which is basically alphabet taken over for Aleph Bet, right? So terms like that they're using, even like apostle, the term apostle is not an Israelite term, but the term apostle, there were apostles, but if you look at an apostle is really more so a missionary who sets up um, around Aratz, and then but in our mind, apostle is over bishop, who's over overseer, who's over pastor, who's over reverend, et cetera, or the fivefold ministry. But these are words that are not really original words. These are words that are being used um, in what we call English, right? But there is no such thing as so a bishop. We talked about this, I think, on Sunday. A bishop, and we talked about this in a lot of different things. But anyways, a bishop is basically, before it became connected to Roman Catholicism and became attached to Rome, a bishop was just, or well, really, it was already attached to Rome, but before it became part of Roman Catholicism or the mixing of iron and clay, a bishop was just somebody in charge. So you could be a bishop of a territory, you were already in charge, right? So if you were like a governor of a place, one, right? But if you were in charge of another area, you might be a bishop, or different size, right? One had to report to the other. So a bishop of sorts, you could almost think of him like a governor. And so the bishop of Rome, and especially when you start mixing the iron and clay, the bishop is who's over Rome. Then when Rome splits into two, Eastern Rome, Western Rome, that's when the bishop of Rome was given authority by Justinian to say, hey, you go ahead and you run Western Rome. That's basically their first pope. And that's when they make the Justinian decree. How you doing? Y'all ain't tired yet. Peace and blessings. So the bishop is just a modern, it's bishop is like a thing that never really was accurate, as far as, like, we don't have a term for bishop. We don't have a term called bishop. We don't have a term called apostle. We did not have bishops. We do not have bishops. Um, Even if I meet somebody, I'll respect what they mean with the title they have. But as far as our culture, I don't have a bishop. I'm not going to be a bishop. I never want to be a bishop, because a bishop is a way of saying you're over a territory. And really, if we take it to the actual culture, you're saying you're over Roman territory, which I don't need to be over. Um, Now, if you're talking about an apostle, apostolos is really just saying, those who are called to continue in the mission or being a missionary, like Paul and others were, like Timotheus or Timothy. He's called a apostolos, or an apostle as well. So is Barnabas, right? So apostles, we're going to keep on going, and to have apostles or persons who are developing or developing culture, or assemblies, or what the world would call congregate. Well, I won't even say it was worldly, but what they call congregations, right? That's what you're supposed to do. And you would go to different places, you would teach, you would make sure leadership was in place, you would make sure things were in order, you would give a strong foundation, and then you kept them moving. And that's why Paul has all these letters. All of his epistles are just basically answers to somebody writing him and asking him a question. And we were able to keep some of these epistles and be able to notate, still to this day, what were the answers. So he's basically just answering questions, pretty much. For the most part, he's answering questions on all these letters and just telling them what's going on. You said, so is it really just pastor, priest, prophet? I mean, even priest. Yeah, I mean, so it's like a different, yeah, so it's an interesting question. Because So the reason why it's interesting to me, and my mind is trying to go linear, so I'm trying to answer your question. So forgive me, sis. But an apostle, um, or really when you're talking about this stuff, a missionary, stuff like that, like Paul, basically, I guess you would say, is he's not the high priest, but like Paul and Peter and all this stuff, like basically they're priests. They're called disciples, but they're disciples of who? Yahashua. Yahashua is the high priest. So if you're a disciple of a priest or disciplined under a priest, your goal is to become what? Priest. Or maybe the next high priest, which really technically Peter is the high priest of that time. Remember, there was still structure. Paul came in, he had to get permission from the priest to see if he was even qualified, right? And then it says Peter was the one, even Yahashua gave him the exact thing. He said, hey, you're going to be the one. You're going to be the person that we're going to, upon your revelation, this revelation of who I am, upon that revelation that you had, that's what I'll build my church upon. But he even comes back to Peter later on in the book of Acts, right? And it's still developing him. So technically, Peter is the one. You know what I'm saying? Right? Peter is the one. And then eventually you see Paul and some stuff like that, right? And even the talk of chief apostles, stuff like that later on. But there's order, there's structure that has to come in, right? There's order, there's structure that has to come in. So if you're talking about a priest or a prophet really was the high, or not even necessarily the high priest, but a prophet, if you had the gift of prophecy, being the gift of prophecy, that means you're Elohim's mouthpiece. And also you're his vessel simultaneously, right? So, but is the prophet any better than the priest? The prophet is a priest. Is the pastor any better than the prophet or the priest? The pastor should be a prophet and should be a priest. These things that we contributed to, it comes through another lens, right? So we think a prophet is somebody who's a soothsayer. That's somebody else's culture, right? Elijah is not only a prophet because he could speak to the future. Elijah could rain down fire from heaven right now. Elijah could speak a word. Elijah could say, dip yourself in the Jordan. Elijah, like there's a bunch of stuff. Somebody might say, well, you don't have to be a prophet, you're a healer, but Elijah could heal, right? So is Elijah not a healer because he doesn't have the title, right? Like it gets into other areas that are very kind of wonky, right? So an apostle, I believe there are apostles, by apostolos, by that. Like I believe there are still persons carrying on in that same vein, but every apostle technically should be a priest, an Israelite priest, because any priest, any preacher, any prophet, any apostle, any whatever you want to call missionary, etc., right? Any of these persons that you have, any teacher, any pastor, whatever, we're all supposed to be not just Levitical, but going past then, we're all supposed to come through the same priesthood. Who is that priesthood start with, actually? Technically, that priesthood starts with Melchizedek. Now we know the law precedes, but we're talking about the priesthood that we're supposed to follow after Yahashua. Well, that priesthood goes back with who? It goes back with Melchizedek. So anybody who says, that's why we even talked about before knowing these terms, if somebody is Shemitic, right? If somebody is of Shem, if somebody's Shemitic, like then you're supposed to technically be a pastor. So you're supposed to be grafted into Shem, because the term pastor is actually talking about being of a culture of shepherds going back to the times of Shem. So if you're not Shemitic in your ways, or if you're not of the shepherd people in your ways, if you're not of these nomadic persons who gave their lives to Yah, if you're not of Israel, even if you don't keep laws and commandments, if you don't follow the ways, if you don't do the holy days, right, you're supposed to be, according to the word, right, Leviticus chapter 23, utterly cut off, right? So as I've said before, well, yeah, if you want to say shepherdess, when I say prophet, when I say shepherd, I'm not denying that a woman can be a prophet. But I know there are some sisters that are like, hey, you got to say prophetess. Once again, that's what I'm saying. It's title. It's through somebody else's prism. They go, women aren't respected. Women aren't respected. I call Minister Naeem's prophet. I've already told you I have no problem with women instead of pastors, because Deborah was somebody that if she didn't go to war with us, we didn't go to war. Barak did that, right? So you see what I'm saying? There's more cultural stuff to it, but really and it goes back to this chain of command piece that we've been talking about a lot recently. um is a general better than a private? Not at all, right? But so is a general better than a private? Not at all, right? But watch this: is a general saluted by a private? Yes. Why? A general is supposed to be so great at being a soldier that the private should salute them because the general will protect them, right? The private will protect the general because the general will protect the private. One is not greater than the other, right? But one is supposed to be a greater soldier than the other. Same thing, like if you talk about a pastor or a priest or presiding prelate or apostles, whatever titles we have, right? One is supposed to be not better than the other, but they are saluted because of chain of command. You see? So yeah, so even when we talk about apostles, we're really talking about the Greek. If you're saying apostolos, you're talking about what priests and stuff were doing anyways. If you're talking about all these different things, you said is Visigoth teaching embedded in our expression and language? Well, yeah, even some of the stuff we're talking about now is Visigothic, right? Some of the stuff we even do now, right? Prayers up, stuff like that. But prayers up, what does that even mean? Who are you praying to? But a lot of stuff that we do, but we have to look at some of these Gothic tendencies and realize what's going on and recognize the persons that we're under, unfortunately, because we understand them. We're under their standard. So how much more information do you think we would have if the entire Bible stayed and taught in Hebrew? So real quick, I'm going to try and look at some other stuff real quick. I will try to come back to that question. I want to make it clear. Today's not a Q&A session. It might turn into one. Our goal is to try and see, are there things that we're learning in Hebrew Israelite culture, like questions that you have that Hebrew Israelites are arguing against? But I'll try to come to you, D, next. I just want to double check something real quick that I'm not sure if I got off of Patreon. Hold on. Okay, amen. All right. Got another question on here. Sorry, waiting for it to come back on. So we have another question on here that basically asks, was Yehoshua crucified on a cross, so to speak, or on a tree? Right? So there's an argument by many trying to say that Yehoshua was never hung on a tree, right? Or he was never on a cross because it said, curses any man who hangs from a tree, which I'll just answer that without going too much in depth because I do want to get to some of the other questions. I'll make this the last one from the questions that we already had given to us. I do. So when we talk about that piece, if we be honest about it, there are many who have hung from trees, not just of our people after Christ, but even in the Bible. And so anyone who did was cursed. Cursed is any man who hangs from a tree. One of the reasons why Yehoshua is mentioned, being crucified being such a big deal, is because Yehoshua is going to be hung from a tree. It's a precursor. It's showing you what's going to happen. So there is a school of thought that he was not crucified, or there's different words you could use for crucifixion, and the word crucifixion here, and I give credit for at least persons studying to kind of see what's going on. I believe there's a mismanagement of word usage and etymology and being honest about different things, but still, you have to recognize something. So yeah, Sister Monica, you kind of already on it. One of the ways to look at this that kind of dispels a lot of this is just look at the fact that Yehoshua was hung from a tree. If he was crucified, he would have been crucified by two pieces of tree coming together. Right? That's pretty simple. So the tav, two trees, and by the way, even when you see things of even leaning tavs, not all of them were always straight, some of them off to their side, even the way we write the tav, right, this way, but the tav even being lifted up is a symbolization of what's going to happen, right? For if I be lifted up, I'll draw all men. But for us, this even becomes pretty easy because we know, once again, just like we were talking about the Ankh earlier, Tav has been around in our culture, right? It's the language of all creation. So whenever anybody was talking about Tav, Tav means to be marked. Okay. So tav just means to be marked, right? Tav just means to be marked. So if you are already, so tav meaning marked, completed, perfected, etc. So the tav is used even in sackcloth, when people are in sackcloth and ashes, when they would cry, they put a tav. In Lamentations of Jeremiah, you see a tav. With Cain, Cain is marked. He had a tav. Um, it also is not only curse, but it also is something saying you'll be protected even in the midst of being cursed. Cain said, hey, they'll try to take my life because of what I did. So Yahweh tabs him, right? And anybody who saw the tab realized that even though he was cursed, and because he would not repent and get himself back together, he also was protected by the Most High. So when you hear a lot of stuff with some of this, it becomes very clear and present when you learn more culture. Persons are trying their best, by the way, to say he would have had the stuff over him, et cetera, et cetera. Problem with this is too, is that we know that when he was crucified, well, persons will argue this part with you. I'll give you this. Granted, there is, it's I'll say it's open ended. I don't think it's an argument, but I'll give some leeway and be like, I can see why people can argue this point. But if you're talking about crucifixion, so there are persons who were nailed, right, to certain things, but we're kind of taking other cultures away. We know, for example, where the tav comes from. It comes from Roman culture, especially at that time, right? If you look at Roman culture, if you were to go to Rome, if you were to even look on a sewer cover, I believe it is, in Rome, you would see some letters. I can't remember the sequence, if it's SQPR or SPQR. But if you would go to Rome and you would look, you would see SPQR and a bunch of stuff. You would see it, those characters, and you would see them. Um, you'll even see them on sewer tops. You see them on a lot of different stuff all over the place. It's a way of them even like stamping approval. Excuse me. Now, where does this come from? This comes from Constantine, actually. Right now, once again, this is one of those things. Up, you said Constantine, it must be automatically wrong. No, 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 no. Like, we got to look at it for what it is and recognize it for what it is. Right. So this comes from Constantine. Right now, why is this important that we catch this comes from Constantine? Because it's coming from the culture. So Constantine is getting ready to go to battle, and he doesn't believe at this point. He doesn't believe in the Bible. He doesn't believe in scrolls. He doesn't believe in what will become Christianity. He's dealing with straight what many would call heathen religion, and I would agree with you, be heathen religion at this point. So it is not Constantine's belief system at all about the tithe, the cross, blah, blah, whatever. Constantine says, and this could be him making up stuff, whatever, but still, I want you to get the cultural reference for the time. So maybe this didn't actually happen. I'm just telling you what he used to galvanize the troops and to say why he should be the Christian emperor eventually, et cetera, right? Constantine says that he looked up into the sky before the battle, right? He said he made a sacrifice. He made a pagan sacrifice, right? A sacrifice that we don't believe that Yahweh would have necessarily accepted, but he believed that he had a heart. He was right. So according to him, he was at least somebody who believed in the necessity of giving an offering to his deity. And so he gives the offering, and he says as soon as they finish the offering, he personally gives it, which means he's also like the high priest of his command. And when he gives it, he says he looks up into the sky and he sees a tav. He sees a cross, right? And at this time, supposedly, he does not know what's going on, right? So, but he sees it in the sky. He says it's not. He says it's a tav, and he says okay. And so he takes that. He takes blood. I don't know if it's blood or paint. I could be messing that up. But he takes something and marks on the shield of all of his men the tav, and puts SPQR or SQPR. I'm not sure which order it goes in, and it means something specific having to do with a relationship with their deity and victory. And then they go to war and they win, and after that, he's like, I don't know what that is, but I need to find out what that is. And then they build this whole thing based off of the tav, of course, with a lot of still pagan and heathen and Gentile stuff in there, but they build the stuff on there. There's some truth to it. Like I say this all the time. You got to realize there's some truth to every story. So even if you think that he's making it up, you have to realize that in that time zone, he's trying to get a bunch of persons who believe in the tav to say, hey, we should believe in what he's saying. So even if you think he's making everything up, you still have to say to yourself, all right, he's making it a point to say what we believe Christ is crucified on in that time, not our time, in their time. I'm trying to tell you, I saw it in the sky. Even if you believe he's making everything up, right? That's why you have Blue Cross Blue Shield, the Red Cross, a lot of stuff like that, right? It's going back to more of a Constantinian type of romantic theology, if you will. And so, um, so in that instance, you have what's going on there, where Constantine is literally saying, "Hey, I'm going to." Constantine is literally like saying like, "Hey, what you guys say Christ was crucified on, even if you believe he's lying, what Christ is crucified on, that's what I saw in the sky, and then I put these letters on it, and then we had victory. So, um, God is on our side. Jesus is on our side. That's what he's doing. Even if you believe him to be lying, that's what he said. That's what he used to be able to continue his way into, because it was a civil war going on. So he fought his way into becoming the emperor. So you got to recognize that even if you believe he's a lie, that's why I say, even if something's done, never just be like somebody lied and be like nothing that they said is true. Even learn to lie, even if there's a fable, there's a truth in the fable, right? There's plenty of African fables that I taught Solomon growing up, making sure he knew, yes, these are not real, but when they say that the spider came from this, when they say that the lion, this is how the lion came, when they say this is how the baboon has a red behind, when they say blah blah blah, like, look at some of this stuff, because some of this stuff is cultural, and also some of these things, even if they're getting their weird way, there is some truth. They're getting this from somewhere, and you might be able to actually, at some point in your life, even if I'm never able to be the one to teach you, you might be able to see some of this stuff come together, right? Yeah, Knights, Templars, etc. So the reason why they have it on their shield too. So the reason why you see these persons with the shield and the cross is not because they're saying, oh, because we're Christian, well, maybe because they are Christian, but it starts off with Constantine saying, we won a battle because we had this tav on our shields, right? Regardless of whether you believe everything he say to be true, factual. I don't know if it was, because I wasn't there, nor do I care. I do, well, I won't say I don't care, but you know what I'm saying? It's not really going to change my belief one way or the other. However, I do recognize that he's trying to tell persons, hey, follow me. I must be this Christian emperor. I must be the Christian Kaiser. Why? Because I saw what you guys, what everybody believes Christ died on. So if you're somebody who's saying still no to crucifixion, blah blah, you're not somebody who believes not only that, but then also if you look at the time when Christ literally was alive, what were people being crucified on? And if he was crucified by a Roman, right, a Roman governor, right? If he crucified it by a Roman governor, what do you think happened? Right? Even the way that he would have sat when you look at the crucifixion and you study and research with the bend in, and he has the bend in it because he's like this. If he was like this, he doesn't have the same bend, right? He's just hanging. So there's a lot of different things that you'll catch if you recognize what's going on or whatever. But yeah, as far as that is something that a lot of persons fight in our belief system, supposedly in our belief system, where a lot of persons say there's no way he was crucified. And usually, to be interestingly enough, it's usually doctrine, it's usually sect, SECT oriented. It's like a lot of times persons that say don't listen to Paul, a lot of them will be the ones to say he didn't die on the top. Some of them even say the Messiah hasn't come, which is a whole another argument that's interesting, because it's like, well, then you should be still doing these offerings, and you should be having synagogues or going to synagogues. And even if they're not your own, you got to figure out something, because your worship is not righteous if you're not making offerings or sacrifices. And by the way, you don't have to have a synagogue to make a sacrifice. You don't have to have a temple to make a sacrifice, although that's what they try to tell you nowadays. But, sacrifices were made in the wilderness. Well, we had the Ark of the Covenant. Okay, well, even if David lost the Ark of the Covenant, did they stop sacrifices? So it's a lot of, like I said, it's cultural stuff is culturally influenced quite often. But yeah. So sorry about that. But so once again, I'll try to jump to, I think D, you were waiting on me. I'm gonna try and see if I can find your question again, or if you want to put it in the chat again, please forgive me. But I'll go ahead. So our goal once again today is not a regular Q&A. If you'd like to ask questions about our HI belief system, our B to the H to the I belief system, feel free to go ahead and do so. Um, but we're trying to kind of focus on that today. It's not a typical Q&A, but if we kind of run out of those questions, then we'll feel free, we'll go ahead to try and answer as many as we can. So how much more information do you think we would have if the entire Bible had stayed and well, especially if it stayed in Avda or Paleo Hebrew? I mean, I would say the amount of stuff that I've learned in basically broken language has incredibly influenced my walk and my ways and my faith and my belief system. And it's caused me to have more faith and better works and greater trust in Yah than ever. So I can only imagine. I mean, the supply is bottomless. But if I mean, I'm assuming, but really, I mean, if there had been no sin, we would have never lost the language, because the language is the beginning of all creation. So it starts there. But yeah, I guess the more language you know, it's like, remember, the word tongue also means nation. The more we know about our tongue, the more we know about our culture, the more we know about our nature. Yeah. I don't even know if I have any more to say about that. I think that's, yeah. You said, why do some HI say only Judah is left? How you doing, Chief, by the way? I didn't say hello earlier. That's an interesting question. Even the Judah piece, I think we had to be careful. So I get what's happened. So a lot of that comes from, if there is such a thing, please forgive me. I'm about to say something that really is not a righteous saying. You'll get what I'm saying in a second. So forgive me for how I'm about to say this. Um, but the Judah experience, or who is Judah, who is not experienced, many persons aren't looking at history. Many persons aren't looking, or they're kind of sort of looking at his story, but they're not even looking at our story. They're looking at a beautiful lie. And I guess if the angel who's supposed to be very handsome can change himself into an angel of light, if the devil can, rather, then I guess there can be a such thing as a beautiful lie. Or why not have a beautiful lie? It's still a lie, right? We shouldn't necessarily want it, even if it's beautiful, but it's kind of a beautiful lie, if you will. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, there's this new thought process, because we forget it doesn't take that long for something to change. In the 1900s, persons were getting arrested for teaching children that the earth was round in the United States of America. Now all of a sudden, everybody's always believed that the earth was round for thousands upon thousands of years. But anyways, um, there stuff can change really fast. So a lot of persons forget that this is not news to many persons around the earth. Matter of fact, many foreigners have been crying for us as Israel in the United States of America, the Negro, the HI in America, to get themselves together for a long time and walk this walk. So it has not been, this is not new for, it might be new to us, some of us, but it is not really new that most of the world has no problem saying we know who Israel is. Remember, Egypt, the prime minister of Egypt, when Israel becomes a country all of a sudden, when they, through the Rothschild alliance with England and everything, are able to get this land and give it to the Ashkenazi, and they start kicking persons out and everything, and they ask for nations to start believing and representing and saying that they agree with their sovereignty or their position of sovereignty, and they come to Egypt's door and they say, "Hey, we want you guys um, to okay, or to put your stamp of approval on us being sovereign, because you can't be sovereign, right? You're only a sovereign as those above you who are sovereign give you permission to be. Authority always comes downhill." So they come to Egypt, and they're like, they know that this will be a lot of beef and a lot of stuff that will cause wars and fighting and stuff like that to happen if they don't get Egypt to come on board. So they say, "Hey, we need you guys to go ahead and say that Israel is sovereign." And Egypt says, "We're not going to say Israel is sovereign at all." And Israel's like, "Why won't you say that we're sovereign?" And the prime minister said, "Well, when you left and you were black. Now that you've come back, you're white." So, and that's 1940s, 50s, 60s. So we have no problem, recognizing that even if you're not an Israelite, and even if you don't like us as Negroes, many persons will tell the truth. This is like, even when you have to, and I have to be careful with this, because people will tell me that I'm in agreement with a monster. And once again, all lies are start off with some pieces of truth. So I'm not here to say that the sadistic tendencies of a extreme dictator who makes himself a Kaiser or a Caesar um, of Germany, in the way that the Visigothic Constantine, no, the Visigothic Charlemagne would do, right? Is something that we should look at. We should be happy and excited about what he did, and we should be thankful that he caused a Holocaust to happen. I'm not saying that at all. I want to make that very clear. This is for educational purposes only. If somebody tries to say that about me, well, you're going to have to make sure that you bring this part into the discussion as well, right? But OADOL, you know who, HIT, you know who, of Germany, when asked, why is it that you are taking the lives of these persons who are the Jews, he said that they are not as well, and said that, the Jews were actually, swarthy. They were us. And persons will not listen to him, but they won't listen to the prime minister of Egypt. They won't listen to us. They won't listen to Kyrie. They won't listen to Flavius Josephus. They won't listen to the Bible. They won't listen to the Torah. But the reality is all these things keep pointing towards the same thing. Now, I made it very careful how I said it, because I don't agree with that Kaiser, that former Kaiser of Germany, right? But at the end of the day, these persons pointed towards it. And if you go back, I've talked about this before. If you go on YouTube, right, you can do a real quick YouTube search, Google search, etc., whatever search engine you like, and go look up 1920s Israelite. Go look up 1800s Israel, and you'll discover, when you look up, like I'm talking about, look for that grainy black and white footage. But when you look it up, you'll discover that they look not just like persons of color. No, they look like they're Negroes, West African Negroes, forced away from their culture in the Spanish Inquisition and the Portuguese Inquisition. Negroes over to Point Lucia or Point Lucia, and Negroes, Jamaica, Negroes, Haiti, right? Negroes, Khalifa. That's what they look like. Negroes, one drop blood rule. That's what they look like, right? That's what they're said to be. That's how they're described. They're even described in the same manner. The Bible describes Christ in the same manner. Remember, we got kicked off because we said this, but the Bible describes Christ in the same manner that it does that the Moors are described by a European monk. Almost the same exact, almost to the letter when you look it up. Okay, I'm exaggerating a little bit, almost to the word, right? Literally, like described the same way. So when I say all that, I'm saying this: that when people say, "Why do they say only Judah?" There's a beautiful lie. It's a lie nonetheless, though. We should call it out. How you doing, Sister Cheryl? So what do I mean by the beautiful lie? There were persons who have been working on reparations way before we were born, right? And so persons were trying to get reparations still in the late 1800s, early 1900s. What happens is that they're turning everything away. They're saying, you can't prove this, blah, blah. We can't do anything. We already gave you 40 acres and a mule, even though they rip it away as soon as they off-link it and stuff like that. So there's a lot of different things that they're trying to come into connection with, connectivity. We're trying to figure out how can we get 40 acres and a mule. It was known that Israelites are black, and it was known even with places like in Savannah, Georgia, where you have the Israelite church that was when they became free. They literally called themselves Israelites, built a church, built it in the same manner that the temple, same kind of wood and stuff, was built out of Solomon's temple, and put Hebrew characters all over the place. Or there's a place literally called Free Israel, where there were persons out of one of the president's families or whatever, and he didn't like, matter of fact, he might have been a Rothschild, I'm not sure, but either way, they didn't like slavery or whatever, so they actually gave up their slaves when they finally took over all the money and everything. They let all the slaves be free. Slaves stayed in the same place, called themselves Israelites, and be known as a free Israel state. A lot of different stuff like that happens through history. Oluwadah Equiano saying, like, that he realized when he actually learned the Bible for the first time, he remembered his childhood from when he was taken, and remembered that actually he is an Israelite. So there's a lot of different stuff that we have there. But In this time, they're trying to get reparations. We're trying to get reparations. So they can't get it through any of these other prisms. So they say, you know what? There's a guy who is an Israelite, right? He is a Hebrew Israelite. And he said, and this is late 1800s, early 1900s. He says, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to see if we can get it through being Israel. So they didn't lie about that part. Here's where the lie comes in. He says, all right, well, we need 12 branches, what you call 12 tribes, right? Which would be 36 branches or 36 countries or 36 children. He says we need 12 children, 12 families, 12 nations that come out of the main nation, right? So what does he do? He says, all right. He says, all right, well, I need, he says, Israel is, Judah is United States of America, and Benjamin is this, and this Puerto Rico is this, and Cuba is this, and even throws in some European places to be like, hey, those who are scattered over there, they can be this too, and maybe some of those people have the DNA, and he's trying his best to come up with a reparations piece. Of course, United States of America ultimately will discount this claim as well, right? Which means that they knew about us also saying that we've been this, even officially on wax for a long time, or on paper, for a long time, right? Then so basically then from there though, this kind of became almost canonic. Became canon for a lot of persons, and we started trying to use scripture and all types of stuff to be able to support what somebody had made up, just to be like, hey, they already know who we are, we already know who we are, we'll just go ahead and say this. We got to put it on paper, and we got to find a way to make sure that by law they can't discount who we are. And then once we get this, if we say that because they love Israel so much and everything, right? If they love Israel so much and we're really the Israelites, what they basically end up saying to everybody is what is it that we should go ahead and become, yada yada yada, or they should give us the money because they should give reparation to us. You said the church you grew up trying to say Britain was spiritual Israel. Yeah. So a lot of stuff like that, right? Even some of that, some churches even caught hold of that. So and obviously that's not the only place. There's a lot of other places we can go. You said you guess you don't want to hear what you were saying. They are so nosy. Yeah. Right. So all this stuff into the belief of only Judah. Oh, okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So there's a lot. So there's a lot of different ways we could probably go with that. I would make it a point to say that at this point, as much as it's going to sound like a cop out answer, I honestly and fervently believe this, and will say this over and over and over again. I won't say it doesn't matter who's Judah, who's Benjamin, this and that. What I would say is there's so much of a mixing, right? I focus, and now this is once again, I get it. If somebody's against this, you're probably not gonna like it or whatever, right? Um, but it is what it is. I focus more so on. Um, I like to focus more so on what is the spirit that you have. Now, I believe that there are ways of being able to tell, like more than likely you are Judah, which I'm actually would be more than likely Levi and Judah put together, a mix, and really even some Benjamin included, bare minimum, right? But it's kind of, if we be honest, because of being separated, it's really gonna have to be Yahweh himself, or through Ravak Hakodash, obviously. Um, that's gonna have to reveal some of this stuff to us, because even if you have stuff like, the most we really know is E1B1A bloodline, but you can kind of tell. This is one of the things in the Bible, knowing your culture, right? Um, Benjamin is a leader. I'm sorry, Benjamin is a warrior. So people with that like warrior spirit, you can kind of already see it on them. Reuben is firstborn. Those of us who are firstborn, we kind of carry certain characteristics no matter what. Um, Levi, as obviously supposed to be of the Levitical priesthood, so should be in tune with certain things, and it even means to be by the side, to be connected. Judah means to be to talk about praise, but also Yahweh or Judah is speaking on different things as far as belief. If you're talking about Simeon is talking about to be heard, right? Very important to be heard. Also, they like to hear. Naphtali, right? Naphtali is going to be very I was going to say acrobatic. They could be acrobatic, very athletic. There we go. Dan could be very judgmental, but if you take that and put it with the law, They actually can also judge when it's all right to be able to um, perfect, and also to be able to express love, and also judge when it's all right to nurture. Yeah, right. They've changed jobs and titles and hardened their hearts. Yeah. So how you doing, Michelle? Thanks for being part of the community. So even in that, I believe there's more of that we should study, because if we're going to be honest, because of being so scattered, because of being enslaved, because of being broken down, because of being full of contempt, because of not keeping up with certain values that these families would have, because of not keeping up with the paperwork, because of the paperwork being burned up and eviscerated, whatever the case might be, it's going to be very rare that any of us will be able to 100% accurately point out who we are. But that's when we have to recognize that just being Israel is important, and make sure that we do these things. And also, over time, what will happen is that we'll recognize. See, I don't know. I'll be honest with this. I've thought about this before, but this is something that we'll just have to see how it flows. Who knows if over time we'll be like, man, you know what? Like, y'all are Judah, and we'll start and stop, instead of being like praise and worship group or choir or musicians, we'll just be like Judah is praise. So when it comes to praise, even people who might not have the singing ability or whatever, but they can always usher in the spirit by praising Yah. When it comes to praise, we might just start referring to them as Judah, just like we say, oh man, that person's a praiser, that's a worshiper. Well, we might eventually get to a point where we get back to culture and say, that's Judah. I see it all over her, right? You see what I'm saying? Like, so I think culturally, that's probably more important. How you doing, Sister Etherin? That's more important, is that we get the culture down, and those things will begin to come back. And who knows, Holy Ghost, before Yahashua come, might reveal this stuff, right? But we'll see how that works, right? Once again, that's for the Most High to decide, to give utterance, and for us to give him thanks and praise and let him do what he does. Amen. Um, yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know if there's another question. I apologize. I think I might have missed it. How you doing, Mormon 723? And Shalom, peace, everybody coming on all platforms. Is there another question that I missed? One, I probably did. And today, once again, we're trying to focus on questions having to do with our belief system, as far as H/I persons. If you have another question, comment, or concern, though, if we don't get any of that, we'll treat it. But today's not technically an official Q&A session, so we're trying to answer questions specifically with that. That's what today was supposed to be about. How you doing, Shebrew? Any other questions, comments, or concerns? Did I miss any questions, comments, or concerns? Any other questions, comments, or concerns? If not, you guys are in charge of this. So if not, I'm going to take my leave and let you do the same. Yes, I'm saying HI for today. Well, I don't mind saying it, but if I say it too many times, they would definitely flag it and say that we're reverse racist and all that stuff, and try to cancel it and all that. So just to be careful, especially for TikTok. IG maybe as well, but IG seems to be all right with the stuff. But yeah, I'm just being careful, just to make sure. I got to be a steward. Once again, we'll ask, are there any other questions, comments, or concerns? If not, I will be faithful to what I just said, and I will release you into your day. Sovereignty still going on? Yeah, Sovereignty is already on Patreon, so you can go through some of the stuff that's already lifted up on there, or whatever. And if you want to wait to the Q&A, we can try to answer as many sovereignty questions as we can on next Thursday. You said your feelings that we're allowed to do on the Sabbath has changed the last few years. What are the thoughts? So I will make sure I don't want to give any opinion on it. So it depends. Like, that's a very vague, not to say anything wrong about your question, Sister Tia, just saying it's a very vague question, as far as, that I can go so many different ways with that, right? Depending on what you're actually talking about, or what anybody else might talk about. Because many of us, there's something, and I think, as many things are, if we would come together and live together, is one of the biggest things that happens with the Bible that's missing, is that we don't live together. We're not working on building a nation, right? So since we're not working on building a nation, we do not really have things that we do habitually together, right? So if we don't make a habit of doing certain things together, then we'll constantly and consistently miss some things that the Most High has for us and wants for us every single time, right? So when you're talking about nation building, um, us coming together all the time and doing stuff together on the Sabbath, things like that, you begin to identify certain things that you guys are and are not going to do. I'm not saying that obviously y'all's word shouldn't be the biggest influence. However, coming together helps us to see some of this stuff in action and what is work, what's not work, what are we kind of going overboard with, etc. Right? So as far as excuse me, as far as I don't know why it's taking me so long. Oh yeah. So as far as getting to Sabbath, just Sabbath in general, a lot of times I would say it's over. I hate to say, I don't want to be somebody that has you doing something unlawful. Like, okay, for me, I guess I'll just say personally, I don't even know where to go with it right now, especially with time. I'll just go personally. Um, Shabbat is going to be. I'm gonna try my best to do the actual Israelite Shabbat where it falls. I think right now it's a Monday or a Tuesday. I'm sorry, I should have that. I have my calendar with me, but I believe it's Mondays right now. Could be wrong. If not, it's Tuesdays. But I think it's a Monday right now. It changes as the moon comes into position. We start a new month each time. So for me personally, I look at that as my Shabbat. But also too, I recognize for SOC, for all of us, a lot of us are in the land of our captivity to a point to where we can't get off on our actual Shabbat days, and they won't actually look at our days of, they won't actually give you freedom of religion the way they're supposed to, or at least we don't even know how to argue it to a certain degree to get that freedom of religion, right? So I get that a lot of us are kind of in a predicament, so we still make sure that we open up Saturdays for Shabbat. For me, Shabbat starts at 6 p.m. the day before. It ends 5:59 p.m. the day after, because really that's how our days work, from the beginning to the right, or from the beginning through the rising, right? um we think from sun up to sundown is a day, but the reality is our day starts when the sun goes down, right? Even your digestion overnight is supposed to be in the evening. You're supposed to have had your last meal probably about 4 or 5. You're supposed to be getting yourselves ready when the cock crows. If you notice, even when Peter denies Christ thrice, the cock crows, movement is going on, everybody's up, he's recognized, there's a crowd. Now you could say there's a crowd because of what's got happening with Christ, sure, but there's a lot of that where stuff is going on in the middle of what we call the middle of the night, because persons are starting to get up already, right? So, and a lot of you even have that situation where you'd be like, man, I wake up at 3 a.m. and blah blah, and I don't know why I've been waking up. I'm young, I'm 25, I'm still waking up at 3 a.m. because your day technically is not supposed to start when the sun comes up, right? You should already be starting your day and have a lot of stuff done. So by the time the sun comes up, you actually do have time to do stuff like, get in the sun and rest, ground yourself, get food ready and prepared, because you've already done the hard work. So you just basically chilling out when the sun comes up. And then when it goes down, you're ready to go to sleep. You're part of a culture that says try and, party into the night because they're into lunar worship, right? Lunacy, lunatics. It doesn't even mean crazy. It means people that like to worship the moon. So our days start the evening before. So I would normally start at 6 p.m., go to 5:59. Some of the stuff that persons do, like they're like, you can't travel anywhere by car, because if you went somewhere by car, it's like the same like traveling and using your horse or your ox or blah blah. I'm like, and I'm just being honest. I'm like, no. If I travel by car, like that's something that's modern Israelite stuff that's kind of seeped in. Maybe some Seventh-day Adventist stuff that's kind of manipulated a little bit of thought process concerning that, but no, my car is not an ox. And then somebody says, well, what if your car breaks down and it causes somebody to have to work? Okay, but what if it doesn't? Why am I having no faith in my vehicle? And why are you not making sure that your vehicle is this? As far as cooking on Shabbat, yeah, I don't cook on Shabbat. I try my best not to. right? There are times, like, especially, I have a child. So if my child needs to eat and something happens to the food or the food's not right, I'm not going to let the child just not eat. Maybe I might go buy something for the child or even get chips or something. But something, I feel like some of this stuff has gotten to ridiculous nature. I'm just being honest. Like, there are persons that don't send emails on Sabbath. I'm like, why? Is it a work email? Is it like, can we not send if you can't send an email, can you not send a text? If you can't send a text or email, can you call somebody? By the way, in the Bible, persons came together on Shabbat and worshiped. Do you think that the priest didn't work? So I think context matters, but once again, I believe like a lot of stuff, it comes together when you begin to actually have relationship and meet with persons on a regular basis. It starts working itself out a lot greater and a lot differently than what stuff does. Remember, they even challenged Yehoshua. They were like, hey, your disciples are picking grain to eat, and it's Shabbat. So because they were going like this, right, and in eating, they were like, oh, your disciples are blah blah, right? And he had to explain to them like, hey, which one of y'all, if your ox fell in the ditch, wouldn't take off all your clothes and get to work making sure that you got them out, because that's money, right? You're not just gonna let your ox that's gonna help you to get money, it cause it to where y'all whatever. So there's a lot of stuff that kind of is person. And remember, a lot of those situations that happen with, you have to also read into it. Some of those things that are being said, especially at Yehoshaphat's time, these are religious leaders who don't even follow the law, and who were trying to get them to follow the traditions of their fathers, but not the law of the father. So yeah, so for me, especially because of time. We've had some teachings on Shabbat and stuff like that, but especially as far as time is concerned, I would definitely say like research some, look at some things. But there's some things that I feel like, if we were just honest about it, some of the stuff that we're going is kind of overboard. Like, some persons are like, I don't want to come on to a platform and worship, or some persons are like, well, the Bible does say don't spend any money, so I'm going to make sure that I don't buy any food. And I get that. Once again, it's easy to have your food prepared, blah blah this and that. I think that's a simple one. I think it's as best as we can to rest. Now, rest, even in the Hebrew context, I think this is one of the big things too. Rest doesn't mean to not move, to not live, right? Rest doesn't mean you can't watch television. No such thing as television. Back then, they read scrolls. So to think that you can't read a book or watch a movie or play a video game, I think is a little much. To be like your children can't go outside and play, I think might be a little much, right? I don't think that there's restrictions on the children going outside to play, right? I think that there has to be some connectivity to the culture. To work and even to rest meant different than what they mean today. Like, a lot of you, when you say you're going to work today, you mean, for us, we would say you're going to toil today. That's what we would have meant. Like, when you say you're going to your 9 to 5, not saying you shouldn't have a 9 to 5, do what Yah has for you. But, for us, if we would have looked at to go to work, what you call going to work, we would call a job or to toil. Even Job, or in the Bible, who you call Job, his name means to toil, right? And so when you look at when Job starts losing everything, we only talk about Job chapter 1 in Job, like chapter 41 and 42. Maybe we talk about Job 1. We only really focus on Job 1 and 2 and Job 41 and 42. We really don't read much about Job outside of that. If we be honest, a lot of us don't. And especially if you read Job or Job, Yob, really, and you read Yob, Aleph, a lot of persons just kind of think that the only thing that we should really get out of it is he struggled and then he got everything back. But that whole thing is telling you what toiling is. Now, he's toiling because Yahweh actually is allowing Hasatan to see that no matter how much he tries to make Yob toil, because remember, Yob was not toiling until Hasatan is released. So he's trying to let him know, like, hey, you can try and do whatever you want, but he's going to still remain faithful to me, even when he's toiling, even if he's not and is able to do his work. So these things are right there for us to see, but it's cultural, right? But toil is different for us. So are you toiling or are you in your work? Once again, I don't stop being in my work because it's Sabbath. So if I got to preach, I still going to preach on the Sabbath. On Friday evening, tomorrow evening at 8 p.m. Eastern New York time, that's past the beginning of the day for me. I'm still going to preach on Sabbath because that's my work, right? If we were in ancient times and it was time for me to go to the synagogue, I wouldn't not go to the synagogue because it's Saturday. If I'm still supposed to do a sacrifice, if I'm still supposed to make sure a scroll is taken out, if I'm still supposed to pray for others, that doesn't stop because it's Saturday or Shabbat, if you will, right? So there's a lot of stuff in that I think, like, if we go into it, you realize. But once again, when you learn it, when you live it long enough, when you're around others, and when we get that part of things moving, really, where we have more of the personal interaction on a regular basis, that's when you really start to see, because now you start to see like some of this stuff in work. That's why I say a lot of times one of the biggest things, I think I already said this, right? One of the biggest things missing concerning the word of Yah is nation building, is family, is living together, is being habitual. We are not together enough to even catch what a lot of this stuff is. Once you see, somebody asked about marriage earlier, once you see that beloved, let not your heart be troubled. If you believe it in the Father, also believe it in me. In my Father's house there are not many mansions. If it was not so, I would not have told you. When you know that a mansion is an add-on to the house, and you realize that that husband was supposed to be pre-qualified as a husband, and once the parents had agreed on the husband and wife becoming each other's husband and wife, he was not going to be able to even think about enjoying his bride and having her live with him until he had built an add-on to his father's house. When you see that, and now you have a couple, all you need is just one generation to have a few people that start to live that and start thinking about having wealth, right? Have something that your son can have, so that your son will be able to have a your son is like, everybody's so worried about the son and the daughter leaving in our diaspora because we don't think about the next generation. We don't think about generational wealth. But the reality is, if when you start looking at marriage properly, you realize my son's going to have to build a mansion on my property. So I've got to have some property so that at some point my son can build an add-on for him and his wife to stay on my property after I've already given him an inheritance where he should have his own property, which means that when him and his wife begin to have at least their first set of children, they'll be able to be around our family. We'll be able to help them to move. We don't want them to leave and move away and be in a whole nother place. We're supposed to make our own block. You know how persons will say, buy up the block? We don't even need to buy up the block. Buy up a nice little bit of land, even have a small home, and just have one generation build on to another and another and another. And before you know it, after 5 generations, you have 5. It looks like you got a little strip, a little brownstone type community coming together. But really all it is what? There's an add-on and an add-on and an add-on and an add-on. So now we have enough housing for a family to all live together in one place. And all of them made sure that they had an inheritance of land somewhere else, so that their children can be building onto what you're doing here and building onto what you're doing over there. Before you know it, now many mansions takes on a whole nother meaning, doesn't it? That's community, right? So we think mansion as far as just get a big house, not realizing mansion means I have the mind to add on or allow my children to add on to what I built. Why is it so hard for us to come together as a nation? Because once again, we've been trained outright we're not supposed to, and we believe that greatness comes through the individual, not realizing that no individual can be. We can never seek the level of individual without first recognizing the community the individual lives in to compare it to, and we can never talk about the society without realizing what the individual goes through. No individual is greater than the society. No society is greater than its individual. Now, here's the next part. What society do we want to be part of? Are we okay with still just being United States, Florida, Georgia, Mississippi? Or are we willing to say, okay, we want to be part of a society that's ours, that really belongs to Yah, of course, and we are the stewards over. And then if it's that type of society, then we get to make sure that we impregnate the society with the rules that will blossom into generations of that society flourishing and moving, and individuals being influenced by that, and therefore continuing to influence the society, and that being an integral and interdependent part of launching our nation. Right? If we ever get to that point where we realize it's about nation building, then everything we do is about nation building. Because whether you believe it or not, you're always building a nation. It's just not always yours. You said the holy days being important. How do we handle the different calendar issue? I want to get right, but I don't know. Well, once again, it comes to a thing of getting to a place where there can be some kind of sovereignty, some kind of freedom. So sometimes, like if the holy day happens to be on a Monday and you have to work on Mondays, either you have to figure out how to make sure that your job situation is all right with that, and you can do so by law if it's your, you have to make sure you're ahead of it though, or even knowing in advance, right? Like We have a calendar online. We have a calendar that we give via donation. We have different stuff. I even try my best to tell you dates that are coming up. Like October the 3rd is going to be Feast of Trumpets. October the 12th, Day of Atonement. October 17th to the 24th, Feast of Tabernacles. But once we have those days set, then it's on us to start saying, okay, what can I do with my surroundings, with my culture, even with those who might be close. Like some of us have persons who are in our city. Some of you have persons that live 20 minutes away, 15 minutes away, 30 minutes away. Some of you have persons that are only, and I know it's going to sound weird for me to say this, but they're only 2 hours away, only 3 hours away. That means every other weekend, maybe you could meet up with persons and meet up, whether I put something together or not, right? Whether I'm there or not, whether Elder Alma's there or not. And as much as I don't want to say this, because I believe you should make sure you're under the ministerial staff, if they can't make it that weekend or not, you can at least reach out to them, let them know what's going on, and even impress upon them, hey, come on too. Right? Whichever way it is. I know the ministerial staff's trying to get stuff going in many places. But when we try to become a nation, right, a lot of this stuff goes away. But as I was saying, you know, there has to be a reward for it, but also there has to be a mindset that we need to do it. But we're always building somebody's nation. If you go to Walmart today, you're gonna build what's the name of the family? Is it the Wall something family, whatever their name is? If you go to their stuff, you're building up their nation. If you make sure that you give towards the Trump candidacy or the Harris candidacy, you're giving towards the nation. Thank you, Walton. You're building a nation. If you give to a college and make sure you give back, if you're in that Greek letter stuff and you keep giving back, you're building a nation. So at some point we have to recognize whose nation is greater. And if Yah's nation is greater, and watch this, and I'm not even trying to say that you shouldn't check us, that you shouldn't be like looking for results. But if I'm saying 5 to 10 years, we looking to at least have something to where we can live. And even between there, we want to have food and we want to make sure that we can do some kind of events, right? Check me on that stuff for sure. But I'm just right, check me, keep me in line on that, right? That being said, also too, let's keep it a buck. You ready? Let's keep it a buck. How often do you check Walmart and be like, hey, Walton family, what are you doing with this money when I'm helping you build this nation? You don't do that. You just pay because it's so embedded in you. It's ingrained and you believe it to be important. You believe that's where you get your stuff from, right? Like, I'm gonna be honest with you. Bruda, who makes clothing, Brother Jermaine, who makes clothing, Sister Shima, who might start making clothing soon, others, right? Minister Shante, who can sew clothing and stuff together for you. Or crochet it, excuse me if I'm using the wrong term. Might not even be crochet, forgive me, right? Et cetera, et cetera. We have so many different gifts that persons have. I'm just talking about clothing only. If you guys were to be like, hey, I want to speak, I want to see what Minister Shante is doing. If I sow into her life, it's like, cool, but you got to sow. But you don't ask if you were to buy clothes from DKNY. Is DKNY still a thing? I don't even know. Right? The CK, you don't ask Versace. You don't ask persons who are coming out talking about, the coolest monkey in the jungle or whatever that was not too long ago. You're not asking them what they're doing. You go to Target still, knowing that Target's going to have a whole bunch of stuff up there that's against your culture. Right? If your boss says jump, you say how high, because you're trying to figure out how to make sure that you don't get in trouble.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
So can I replace the gutter in your property because it's clogged like that? When it rain, the water stains.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Right now, can I talk? Can I? I'm sorry. I know that you'd like to be able to talk about it now, but I'm sorry. I'm actually finishing something up.
Okay. Sorry, but I can do this.
No, well, like I said,
Okay.
I'll be able to talk to you about
All
you soon. I'm actually doing something.
Let me know. I go to the
Yeah, like I said, I'll be able to talk to you soon. So yeah. So anyway, so basically, when we speak on these things and we operate in these things, if we look at what's going on, right? Oh, it's Gap. Okay, Gap. Oh yeah, you're right. It was Gap. But when we think on these things, I'm just saying we don't ask them questions. We don't say, hey, what is it that you're doing? When you going to do this? Blah blah, this and that, whatever. Right? We just go ahead and do so, and it's because part of the culture is just to go ahead and be to be a consumer. So all we do is consume, right? But we're not used to being persons that produce. And when you're a producer, right, you start thinking like a producer. And we have to start realizing we can produce. Then when we start producing, you know what'll start happening? You'll start saying, I'm going to give into us. But then you also have more right to say, hey, when I give into us, what am I getting in return? The only reason why you guys, like you guys, we got to reverse. You will question your diaspora. You'll question the brother who's doing everything he can. You'll question his price. Hey, how come you're asking $30 for it? They asking 35 over there. Why you mad? But you think just because he's your brother, he should give you less. But you don't mind making sure that you'll give them more, and that you could care less as to whether or not they actually sow into your life. We have a really weird fascination with so-called capitalism, right? We have a very odd so-called fascination with capitalism, where we are in a system of capital. Whoever has the most capital, this, that, whatever. The reality is that, you know, we should actually sow into each other, and sow into each other because we are a nation, and because we have the same values, and because we're all, not some of us. Now, this is where we got to start calling out. If we got a bunch of persons that are going to sow into your business, then we got to say, hey, where's the stuff going to the storehouse? Pastor Kofi, I bought my copy of the book, right? I sold into this, I sold into that. Hey, um, why is it that when persons need help, I understand we can't help everybody all the time, we still growing, but why is it that if somebody needs help, you don't give to anybody? That's an honest question. Now, we obviously do, but if somebody was like, you don't give to anybody or whatever, I should be able to say, hey, I can't give you all of our business. That wouldn't make sense, even business wise, for us to do that, and we're not even allowed to by law, the way that we're set up. That being said, though, yeah, talk to sister so and so. Look at this video over here. Talk to brother so and so. Blah blah. You know, I'll go ahead and show you this. Matter of fact, come on a live session. We'll ask persons. We don't try to do this that often because we're not supposed to brag on it. Like, we don't brag on ourselves, but check it out for yourself. See if what we're saying is true, right? But we have that mindset with ourselves. But somebody who's not going to help you at all, you're not doing that at all with them, right? So we have to comprehend those things that are going on. But anyways, time is getting past us, and as you can hear, I got persons trying to figure out how to talk business over here. But time is getting past us, and actually, I'm supposed to be taking the fam to make sure that we can do some stuff real quick today. So I thank you all. As you can hear, that they're gonna keep getting louder and louder. So before I start yelling at them and stuff like that, let's just go ahead and take our leave for today. Appreciate, love y'all. Thank you so much, and we honor your presence. We honor what your help is doing in your life, and we're thankful and grateful to each and every one of you. So hopefully we'll see you guys later. I can't do a shout out today, so prayerfully we'll see you later. We have a Feast of Tabernacles meeting coming up on Saturday. No meeting for tonight as far as regional meeting. No regional meeting tomorrow evening. If you recall, we had one big one on Tuesday, so prayerfully we're able to attend. And I think that's it. Besides, we'll be on live this evening at 8 p.m. Eastern New York time. So Tadah, Yahashlam, thank you so much. Appreciate, love you. You guys take care. And as always, it's been Pastor Kofi. I'm sorry. We give our honor and praise to the Most High. Yahweh Elohim. We give our praise and honor to him for my wife, the Honorable Amma, who lives a life that's able to be honored. As always, you can check her out on TikTok, YouTube, her website, and Pinterest at Bloom and Flourish, not A-N-D, the letter N, Bloom and Flourish. She is a healer, herbalist, chemist, and biologist by degree. We'll have our official Q&A next Thursday. So if you want to have some questions ready for that, feel free. And we'll see where Holy Ghost takes us, but we should be getting back into baptism conversation starting tomorrow at 8 a.m. Eastern New York time. Prayerfully, we'll see you tonight for the live session. And until next time, remember that you are loved, you are necessary, you're majestic, you're fearfully, wonderfully made, and you, which is all of us working together, will be the reason why people who are in this system no longer have to be of it. Shalom, family. Take care. Peace.